Welcome back to my channel. Today you are going to watch second part of What If Naruto and Sasuke travel back to the past. And without further ado, let's back to the video.
The light that had blinded the four shinobi was finally fading, and the image it had left behind would live on in the mind of the young shinobi who had witnessed the events. Uzu had changed as a result of the seal matrix, Naruto's blood, and the chakra mixing in the village center. What was once ruined buildings and scorched ground littered with long-forgotten skeletons was transformed into a bustling marketplace. People rushed in all directions, eager to complete their daily tasks and return home to their families. The ninja appeared to have traveled back in time to before the village was destroyed. What the hell happened? Finally, Naruto exclaimed. The knowledge he and Kyuubi had gleaned from the mess that had been implanted never mentioned this. Were they really in the past, or was it all a dream? What brought it here, and how long did it take to set up? Where? How? What? That was the only coherent thing Kakashi could say. He, too, had not anticipated this. Despite having a world-renowned master of Fuinjutsu as a teacher, he knew that even this was beyond the Yondaimi's abilities. Nothing made sense. The sealing matrix alone would have taken years to create, and the natural elements would not have allowed it to stand alone. Continuous redrawing of parts would be required. So, how had the seal gotten through the elements, let alone the invasion? Where are we, Naruto-kun? Hinata was taken aback. It was almost as if she had entered another world, and she didn't know what to do. Should she scan the area to see if this was all a genjutsu, or should she avoid using chakra in this location? Was she merely passing through time and space, or was she truly present? Dobi. Your relatives were both completely insane and completely brilliant. As he stared at the masterpiece in front of him, Sasuke said aloud. He was even aware that the work required for such an elaborate setup would have been nearly impossible to complete without a large team working on it. Add in the upkeep to account for the natural elements, as well as the information that would have to be updated and stored in the matrix itself, and you've got at least 30 shinobi working on preserving the seal on a skeleton crew. I'm not sure what just happened. This was not mentioned in the information I obtained. Is this some kind of genjutsu? He eventually squeaked. The mere sight of people who had been nothing more than the skeletal remains of who they had been moments before now walking and enjoying life as if nothing had happened wreaked havoc on his emotions. He had already been perplexed about how he should react to seeing the remains of people he had never met before, and now they were right in front of his eyes as if they had never died. Shaking his head, Kakashi managed to snap out of his shock and perform the release quickly. He groaned when the expression didn't even flinch. It appears to be a projection of Uzu's final moments, intended to show a returning survivor what had happened and perhaps tell them something too dangerous to leave in a written message. He said aloud. Naruto gulped as a group of children ran by, blissfully unaware that their lives were about to be turned upside down. The group watched in awe as the shinobi went about their daily lives, fully trusting the natural barriers to the island to warn them of the impending attack. The most difficult thing to witness was people discussing their future plans and making plans for dinner dates and weddings that would never happen. The idle chatter seemed to distract from the approaching threat, and all too soon the once peaceful marketplace erupted in screams as an explosion from the port rocked the island. Civilians fled to the largest building on the island in search of safety and possibly shelter. Many only made it a foot or two before being cut down by enemy shinobi flooding into the streets. Ships appeared in the ports, with signs of an invasion becoming visible as the cloaking genjutsu wore off. Shinobi raced forward, hoping to buy time for the civilians to reach the emergency shelter, only to be overwhelmed by the sheer number of enemies flooding into the village. The invaders were quickly repulsed by a barrier that sprang up between the residents and the aggressors. With the passage of time, The evacuation began more orderly, while the shinobi of Uzu began to methodically kill the invaders using long-distance jutsu. The living have no choice but to abandon the fallen. Team 7 trailed the group as they dashed into what could only be described as a castle. Inside, it appeared that the events outside had barely reached the entrance as many shinobi calmly directed fleeing people into different areas and assisted the injured to doctors. Azukage-sama. The invaders are still making their way to the island. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of opposing shinobi. Hundreds have already died, with many more injured. The Barrier Corp has activated the defense system, but it will not be effective for long. To their right, a shinobi reported. As the group turned, they were met by the sight of a tall red-headed woman who, if not for her age, seriousness in her eyes, and calm demeanor, could easily be mistaken for Kushina. Has a request for assistance been sent to Konoha? We simply sent it out. Hopefully, they will arrive on time. The Barrier Corp can only maintain the barrier for so long. 2.5 days if they use every ounce of chakra they have and then convert their life force, 4 if they don't. The woman sighed as she looked around at the terrified faces. From where did the invaders come? Iwa, Kumo, Kiri, and a few other smaller nations. I'm not sure I understand. When they were given the 7 honor blades, didn't Kiri swear never to attack Uzu? They did it. So, either they betrayed us or they split into 2 factions. One that refuses to honor the agreement and one that remains true. If that is the case, the loyal faction is completely unaware of the attack. But there's no time to question Kiri's loyalty right now. We have no way to evacuate safely or quickly because the port is damaged and occupied by the enemy. She was enraged. How could they have missed the attack? How had the enemy avoided the whirlpools? How could this have happened without the knowledge of their spies in the countries? There were too many questions and not enough time to find answers. Send out scouts to make sure the secret passages are safe. Take note of how many boats we have in good condition down there. I don't think it's been inspected in a long time. If the secret passage is safe, begin leading the women and children through it. Try to get as many as you can out. Until then, begin recording everything that happened within the last 15 minutes in the Transcendence Seal. If we don't make it, someone will, and I want the truth to be available to whoever does. Kiri's betrayal will not be the last, I believe. Close off the library and armory. Attempt to get the injured people in the hospital out of harm's way. Take out as many invaders as possible. I don't care if they call attacking from behind the barrier the coward's way. They started the fight in a cowardly manner, and we will finish it in one way or another. She gave the order. She took a deep breath and braced herself. Prepare for a code black if we do not receive a response or reinforcements from Konoha within 36 hours. If I can avoid it, I will not let them leave alive. The shinobi looked at her in surprise but hurried to do what she was told. The woman then turned and began walking down the corridor, her destination already planned in her mind. Naruto went after her, certain that she was his grandmother, the Azukage. The hallways became noticeably more deserted as she progressed, and after what seemed like an eternity, she unlocked a set of doors and entered the room. It was dark at first, but as she walked, candles began to light themselves, illuminating the corridor. There was no soul or decoration to be found. It seemed like an eternity to get to their destination, just like the trip to the room, but they soon saw the room open to a large circular space with a lone person sitting in the center. So we've finally been betrayed. That was something I expected. The figure spoke, her voice clearly female. Despite the fact that it sounded quite old, it exuded authority. You are correct, Hime-sama. Kneeling in front of the woman, the Uzu-kage responded. A tragedy, to be sure, but not unexpected. Yumi-chan, have you made the necessary preparations? They have, indeed. I have little faith in Konoha honoring the treaty he made with Hashirama-san. As a result, I've made plans to use that seal if the need arises. Excellent work. It's a shame none of them figured it out. The voice seemed to have a sad tone to it. Did you figure out what? Yumi seemed genuinely interested in what the older woman was saying. The key to achieving peace. We wouldn't be here right now, watching our lives crumble around us, if my father or even my grandmother had figured it out. Power and compassion cannot achieve the desired outcome on their own. They cannot, however, be simply combined into one with no balance. That's what they both overlooked. Tobirama was on the verge of cracking a hidden code. I'm not sure how he figured out the Sharingan's secret. He did, however, and it altered how the Sharingan was perceived by those who took the time to read his research. The elderly lady turned to face the cage and smiled reassuringly. Not everything is lost, my dear. Kushina is not in Uzu, so our last moments will not be forgotten. There will come a time when the Uzumaki will return, and the world will change. I can sense it. The child of prophecy will be born into this world soon, and nothing will be the same after that. My daughter is still in the hands of those who have betrayed us, even though she is not in Uzu. As a result, I can't sleep well. I'm still concerned about her safety. Understandable. As is your responsibility, you should leave and command the troops. Yumi, stay strong, and the Uzumaki will survive whatever happens. However you like, Ryoko-hime. A voice called out, and the quartet came to a halt as they moved to follow the woman. So you've arrived, Naruto. Spinning around so quickly caused the blonde to lose his balance as he stared wide-eyed at the woman. How? Unlike most people, I could sense your presence. It's exactly what I told Yumi. The Uzumaki have not perished, and you have returned to seek the truth. All you have to do is ask and I will give you the answers you seek. The silence reigned as Naruto tried to organize his thoughts so that he could ask the right questions. Some of his questions would not have resolved anything and would have only added to his confusion. Finally, with one question on his mind, he steeled himself and looked the woman in the eyes. Who are you, and what exactly occurred here? The dice had been rolled, and there was no turning back now. However, the response they received changed everything for the group because they were not prepared for their worldview to be turned upside down. In the meantime, in Konoha. Hiruzen, are you certain that allowing Uzumaki to visit Uzushiokager was a wise decision? Sandame's advisor, teammate, and close friend inquired. It could have been or it could not have been. Kakashi, on the other hand, had a valid point. Naruto has been pulling away recently, and if he goes too far, we may be dealing with a rogue with unknown abilities. To me, his exam performance feels like the tip of the iceberg. Kakashi has had little success in getting the blonde to open up to him, and I have a feeling he and Sasuke know more than they are letting on. Because of the mental trauma caused by the massacre, Sasuke is already classified as a flight risk. The elderly gentleman responded. He'd been arguing with Kakashi for nearly 2 days about the man's insistence on taking the Jinchuriki to his homeland. However, he had run out of reasons, and Kakashi argued that Naruto might open up more if he was allowed to gain a small piece of his past. Regardless, he wasn't about to blow this opportunity. The Uzumaki clan's mastery of Fuinjutsu was unparalleled in the world, and despite his own abilities, Minato never came close to matching an intermediate Uzumaki. He was not going to let the Uzumaki clan's secrets remain hidden on the island. So, realizing he was fighting a losing battle, he agreed on the condition that any scrolls discovered be handed over to him immediately. If Naruto demanded that he be allowed to keep the scrolls, he would simply argue that the genin was not prepared to wield the knowledge contained in the scroll. He was concerned that the genin would be far too careless with the technique, injuring himself or others in the process. Granted, the plan had the potential to backfire, but it was his best option. I see. So, if you believe that is the best course for you, I will say no more. However, are you certain that assigning Team 8 to a C-rank mission was a good idea given their difficulties working as a cohesive unit? I see it as a wake-up call for the group. Kurenai will learn how to best handle the genin, and the genin will learn that acting as a cohesive unit is the best way to survive their missions. I wasn't going to give it to them, but I believe it was for the best. After all, what's the worst that could happen? It's a straightforward escort mission. It's not like they'll run into any shinobi on the way. The Sandaime responded, returning his focus to his never-ending paperwork. Naruto is back. The group fell silent as they began the long journey back to the Hidden Leaf. Despite the fact that it wasn't far, it felt like it would take an eternity to get there, with Ryoko's knowledge weighing heavily on their minds. None of them knew what to do, and as a result, they were all dealing with their own doubts and fears. Kakashi, for one, remained silent as he learned that the Sandaime had not only refused to send reinforcements to the Uzumaki, one of their strongest and most loyal allies, but that he had also lied to everyone in the village about how the attack occurred and that he had not received a request for assistance from them. A whole country had been destroyed because of one man's folly. He was honestly reconsidering his devotion to the Hidden Leaf. The Hitaki clan adopted many wolf characteristics, one of the most powerful being pack loyalty. Granted, he had ignored those instincts for as long as he could after his father died, but this had resulted in the death of one of his friends. He hadn't forgotten about them since. He now knew, however, that the Hidden Leaf village was not opposed to breaking away, even if it was only due to the decision of one senile old fool. Sasuke was thinking about what he had learned as well, but for different reasons. Out of pure greed, the Sandaime had been responsible for the deaths of not only his clan, but also of an entire nation. That would be the only reason the man would ask for the Uzumaki clan scrolls to be returned and handed over to the village. But now he had something else to be concerned about. He'd never considered searching the clan's library for anything that might have gone missing. Had the avaricious thief raided his clan's library after they had died? Were they truly buried properly? He was aware that many of the Sharingans had been implanted into Danzo's body. Was that, however, the only desecration of their bodies that had occurred? Hinata was going over everything she knew about the Hidden Leaf, and the more she thought about it, the clearer it became that the Sandaime was to blame for many of the problems that had forced Naruto to time travel in order to save his friends and home. But, if he was willing to exterminate an entire nation, how many others had he been willing to sacrifice to his greed? Was her uncle one of his numerous victims? Also, how many Uzumaki were able to flee the village during the attack? Were any of them alive and well? Was Naruto ever going to meet them? There were far too many questions and far too few answers. Naruto, for his part, was rethinking how he would go about saving the village and whether he even wanted to. Was there enough to save the village, or was it doomed to the same fate? Fate, you say? I'm beginning to sound like Neji now. He considered his tenant, who simply chuckled in response. He was desperate to get rid of the Hidden Leaf and resurrect the Uzu. Then he'd find what was left of his family and bring them home. He would then abandon Konoha to its fate. However, if he did so, he would be a hypocrite for telling Sasuke that vengeance was not the solution. While he would not physically attack the village, he would still be acting out of vengeance. No. That's something I can't do. I promised the kids that I would make the Hidden Leaf a better place for them and their mother to live. I can't break my promise. I'll just have to work harder to make Hokage faster so that I can clean up the rot that has started to spread throughout the village. I'll reshape the Hidden Leaf into the village that Madara and Hashirama imagined. A place that promoted peace, he decided. The shinobi were so engrossed in their thoughts that they almost missed the fact that they were almost back at the village and that a messenger kite was heading for the copy ninja. Kakashi felt like crying as he read the message. Sandaime had made yet another stupid decision, forcing him to go and fix it. He knew the genin needed to rest in order to process what they had learned, but he also knew that this might just give them an excuse to focus on something else. The Sandaime wants us to go and assist Team 8. He dispatched them on a C-rank mission, and they have encountered a problem and are requesting assistance in order to complete the mission. He said to the genin. Sasuke's eyes nearly popped out of his head after a few minutes of thought. Had the timeline shifted so drastically that the mission to Nami arrived a month earlier than usual? Or had the Sandaime sat on that mission for a month before the Dobi demanded a different mission? The Wave mission was the only one he was aware of that required the assistance of a genin squad. Where are we going? He almost yelled. His reaction sparked something in Naruto, causing him to become antsy. There was no other option but to save Zabuza and Haku. They needed their strength for the impending war. Nami no Kuni was the response they had hoped would not be the answer. The team turned and headed in the direction that would lead them to the mission, where everything would begin. The test of whether or not they would succeed in their mission had officially begun. The Rokudame couldn't help but feel dread settle into his stomach as the team ran alongside the chosen route to Nami. His team was supposed to receive the Wave mission, but Kurenai was sent instead. Sakura and Kiba had no chance against Zabuza and Haku. Shino would be able to maintain his cool, but with little help from his teammates, he wouldn't last long. Naruto had decided that Kurenai was a lost cause. A special Jonin in name only, she lacked the skills required to lead her team, and he knew they weren't prepared for a C rank. He never grasped the concept of kunoichi. She never really did anything for Hinata, and it seemed to him that any progress made with Shino and Kiba in the beginning was due to their clans, with her having little to do with it. Hinata used to tell him stories about how Kurenai seemed to protect her from everything. It was disheartening to see someone who was so intent on protecting the one she saw as a sister fall so far behind and endanger her even more while failing to recognize that she was only making matters worse. Hey, Sensei, did the message say anything about how Team 8 was doing? He inquired, breaking the silence. Kakashi shifted his gaze to the genin. They only needed backup because they had been ambushed. I was told to take the team and head to Nami right away to serve as backup. I'm not sure how bad it is or if they kept moving after I sent the request. He responded. Most likely. Naruto thought to himself about Kiba's personality. They were similar in that they both overestimated their abilities and refused to admit when they were in over their heads. While Naruto had learned his lesson, Kiba had not, which is why the Inuzuka died on his last mission. When he realized he was outnumbered, he didn't call for help. Despite the fact that he was KIA, Naruto refused to include him on the memorial stone because he died as a result of his own stupidity. Sakura had objected, but he had ignored her. Showboating and stupidity, in his opinion, should not be rewarded in the same way that true heroes died. Kakashi, for one, was thinking along the same lines as the future Hokage. He had to admit that Kurenai had not been prepared to lead her genin squad on this mission, and that the Tokubetsu Jonin should have turned around the moment she realized she was out of her league. Instead, she chose to jeopardize the lives of 3 genin, one of whom was a clan heir. He knew that if Shino died as a result of her actions, the Aburame clan would never let the Sandame forget his decision to form that team. He could only hope Kurenai had decided to stay put and await reinforcements. He had his doubts that she had made that decision. The team had not yet encountered the Genjutsu user and her team when they arrived at the water. For Naruto, the feeling grew stronger as he realized they had most likely run into Zabuza and that for all they knew, everyone was already dead. Crossing the water on foot, they increased their speed as they approached the clearing, which undoubtedly housed the injured team. Kurenai was having a difficult day. She was certain her team could handle the C-rank escort. After all, it was just a bridge builder. Who on earth would want the old drunk dead? They were then attacked by Chunin-level ninja a few hours away from Konoha. She attempted to interrogate them after incapacitating them, but they had decided to use their suicide pills instead, leaving them with 2 very dead shinobi. She knew she should have asked Tazuna for more information, but she hadn't made the connection yet. He was still just an inebriated bridge builder. She sent the request and then went on her way. She knew that if help was sent, there would be at least one more Jonin, so they wouldn't be in too much danger, right? She had been naive to believe that the next shinobi to attack would be the same as the previous 2. She had never imagined herself facing Zabuza Momochi. One of 7 swordsmen, they were able to avoid his first attack, but the fight quickly deteriorated. When he demanded that they hand over the bridge builder, Kurenai realized she had messed up. The next attack had been unexpected, and while she had deflected it, she had not escaped unscathed. The genin weren't much better. Shino had avoided serious harm, but Sakura and Kiba had been completely helpless. Sakura had decided to scream and cry rather than protect the client, and Kiba had attacked Zabuza, insisting that he was no big deal. His valiant, and rather stupid, plan immediately backfired, severely injuring both Akamaru and Kiba. She could only hope that help would arrive soon. Zabuza sighed in boredom as he stared at the motley crew in front of him. The only one he was having difficulty with was the Aburame. When he got too close to the bridge builder, Aburame's hive would try to swarm him, forcing him to flee. He hadn't expected to have a problem with a genin, let alone one who was severely limited in what they could do in terms of technique. He decided to end the fight by jumping on top of the water and weaving hand seals. He hoped to finish the fight without using any jutsu other than the hidden mist to blind the genjutsu user. He was confident that the mission was complete as he released the water dragon, until another met it halfway. Despite the fact that his dragon was quite powerful, the second one ripped through it and continued to pursue him. He smiled as he dodged the attack and looked at the newcomers. Finally, there was a test. "So you're the copy ninja, huh?" "I'm flattered." Zabuza pondered aloud. Kakashi simply landed next to the exhausted Jonin and gave her a disapproving look. "Why didn't you hold the fort and wait for reinforcements?" He exploded. Kurenai glared at the man, knowing he would never do such a thing. "You're a talker. You wouldn't have done it." She exploded. Both Sasuke and Naruto agreed internally. Kakashi hadn't done so the first time. "Regardless, I can fight on par with other Jonin regardless of handicap. In certain situations, such as the fog, you are severely limited in what you can do." Knowing you were going to a place with a lot of fog or a high chance of fog, and after needing to call for help, a proper Jonin would have waited. He gave a speech. He had little patience for the woman who constantly exaggerated her abilities simply because she was skilled in one of the more control-intensive arts. She had some genjutsu talent, but not nearly enough to continue with this mission, and she knew it. Hinata checks on the others before protecting Tazuna. I want you to be ready, Sasuke and Naruto, if anything happens. I'm hoping you won't get too far ahead of yourself. The three genin nodded and moved into position quickly. Hinata dashed over to Shino and assessed his condition, doing what she could with the knowledge she had. She then moved on to Kiba and Sakura. She didn't need to check to know that the two were beyond her ability to heal, so she went about giving them basic first aid. She had been doing well in her classes and had been told that she was almost ready to advance to the next level, but she hadn't yet. As a result, her ability to heal was somewhat limited. Basic first aid and triage, on the other hand, were well within her capabilities. Kakashi turned to face Zabuza, assessing his condition. Kurenai hadn't even forced him to try, and he was completely relaxed. He was aware that he would have to exercise caution. If this had been another time and place, he would have discovered his Sharingan right away. However, while training with the team, he realized how far his skills had deteriorated as a result of his over-reliance on the Sharingan and resolved to correct it. He rarely used his Sharingan at the start of a battle any longer, and he felt he had surpassed his previous level. He knew he'd probably need it at some point during the fight. Zabuza was assessing his opponent as well. He had hoped to see the infamous Sharingan, but the Jonin made no indication that he would reveal it. He was calm, and despite rumors that he had neglected his training, he had the impression that the copy ninja was more dangerous now than he had been a few months ago. He raised his sword and declared that he would begin the battle. The swordsman dashed forward and swung his blade, the Kabikirabocho, at the Jonin, who deftly avoided it and retaliated by swinging a kunai at the missing nin's neck. The fight between the two was a constant game of cat and mouse as they tried to hit each other. Zabuza's powers seemed to be easily deflected by the Hitaki's nimbleness, so they were fairly evenly matched. When it became clear that the two were going nowhere, they turned to ninjutsu. However, Zabuza noticed something strange about the water dragon that the Jonin used right away. Was that dragon that countered mine yours? He inquired as they locked gazes. That dragon, however, belonged to one of my genin. I'll leave it up to you to decide. Kakashi responded with amusement. He'd long realized that Sasuke and Naruto were far above his level, even if they couldn't use it all for whatever reason, and that they wouldn't show it unless absolutely necessary. The dragon that had raced past him when they had caught up to the team had caught him off guard, and to be honest, he had no idea which genin had made it. Zabuza turned to face the three men who were now guarding the bridge builder and looked at them thoughtfully. He doubted that the Hyuga could have created a dragon of that size. The other two, on the other hand, appeared to be a mystery to him. The raven-haired boy was most likely the surviving Uchiha, but the blonde's origins were unknown. However, the fact that he was being stared at made him uneasy. You have an interesting group there. I never expected to see a Hyuga with Iryo Jutsu. How did you accomplish that? The swordsman inquired, genuinely interested. I informed the clan that they have no control over what I teach my genin. They weren't thrilled, but they knew I was correct and that they couldn't stop me. Kakashi responded. He knew the Hyuga elders were irritated when he reminded them that they were not allowed to interfere with his training unless there was a valid reason. Since then, he had been ignoring their requests for meetings. He knew Hiyashi would have said something about it by now if he had a problem with it. It wouldn't have mattered to him anyway. Hinata was gifted, and he would be damned if he allowed anyone to stunt his development. Returning his attention to the fight, he had an idea that he believed would end it. We're employing attack strategy 3, Sasuke and Naruto. He said this as he left the water and landed on shore, far away from the missing nin. The two in question smiled as they moved next to him. Kakashi had discovered that the two of them enjoyed creating new jutsu and figuring out how to combine them, so he had come up with several combinations that the team could use. They had, however, taken mid-level combinations and turned them lethal to anything in their path. Another oddity they possessed. They enjoyed performing destructive jutsu. Zabuza looked at the trio with interest, but it quickly faded as the three began weaving hand seals for 3 different jutsu. He was aware that the one Kakashi was employing was of a high level, and he had never seen the combination that the blonde was employing before. It didn't take long for the three to finish their strings, and Zabuza quickly began weaving his own as the chakra they were channeling grew. At the same time, the three used their jutsu. The fire jutsu used by Kakashi was impressive enough on its own, but when combined with a lightning jutsu from the Uchiha, it became even more so. When he realized the blonde had messed up his jutsu, a massive vortex of wind and water spiraled around him, combining with the other two to form a massive sphere of chakra hurtling towards him. Zabuza released the giant vortex jutsu he had cast and began fleeing the area, knowing that if he was caught in the aftermath alone, he would perish. They had used a combination that had no type weakness and would most likely tear straight through any defense. It could easily destroy an army and then some. I'm not coming back for that. They appear to be capable of firing at least 3 more shots. Nami will be a barren wasteland if things continue at this rate. I'll return when they're alone or can't combine techniques as easily. He sighed and hauled ass away from the scene. A masked figure in the trees felt as if their eyes had fallen out of their head. That jutsu was devoid of flaws, and the power it possessed was terrifying. The only thought that came to mind was, next time. Zabuza appears to have been startled. So be it. Kakashi smirked with delight. He knew that even without the heat from the jutsu, the nin would have been harmed. Kurenai looked at the team, both horrified and awestruck. 2 genin and 1 jonin had created a jutsu with roughly the same power as a bijudama. There was no way the 2 genins could have improved so much in just a month or 2. If the rest of their skills were up to par, they could easily be jonin rank. Shino, Kakashi-sensei, has low-level injuries that I have healed, as well as chakra exhaustion. Kiba has a severe head wound as well as numerous broken bones. Sakura's back had been broken. The injuries to Kiba and Sakura are far too severe for me to heal. Hinata called out to her jonin, who nodded in agreement. Have you got any stasis scrolls, Hinata? The heiress nodded and quickly sealed away both of the injured genin before sprinting over to her team. Kakashi shook his head at the genjutsu practitioner. We can only hope that the injuries can be repaired, or else those 2 will be medically discharged from the force. Kurenai, I hope this taught you a valuable lesson. As he summoned one of his ninkin, he chastised. I need you to deliver these scrolls to the hospital and this one to the Hokage, Pakun. He said this while handing the scrolls to the ninkin, who nodded in agreement before departing. Fortunately, Akamaru's injuries were minor, and Hana should be able to heal him. Kakashi shook his head and looked over at the nervous bridge builder. I believe you have some explaining to do. Tizuna nearly wet himself when he barked. The rage emanating from the older shinobi was almost palpable. After a lengthy explanation, a tongue lashing, and a lecture, Kakashi turned to face the remaining genin. I'm confident that my genin can handle this mission, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. We are much closer to Tizuna's house than we are to Konoha's, so the mission should be much easier to complete. However, we must also consider the circumstances of our other comrades. Kakashi summed up. He had expected Naruto to speak up, but it was Sasuke who did so. Shino should be fine with a little more training, in my opinion. Furthermore, in his exhausted state, he would be a moving target if we attempted to return to Konoha with him. Furthermore, as you mentioned, we are getting closer to Tezuna's house. While lying about mission details is grounds for canceling the mission and abandoning the client, Konoha has never abandoned anyone in need before and should not do so now. Zabuza will need some time to recover because there was no way he could have completely escaped the radius of that jutsu, so we have time to prepare for him and his comrade who had been watching the entire exchange. Sasuke reasoned that catching Kurenai off guard was advantageous. She had not anticipated such a thorough response. Furthermore, we had just completed 2 missions of our own and could make good use of the remaining time. As a result, continuing the mission is the best option overall when all options are considered. Hinata elaborated. Shino fixed his gaze on the team in front of him. They just finished 2 missions in quick succession and still managed to save them? How far ahead of his classmates were they getting? Hinata's improvement was obvious, and Naruto and Sasuke were clearly stronger than the last time he saw them. We'll just keep moving forward. For this, we'll employ defensive pattern B. Kurenai, I am taking command because it appears that you are not prepared or competent to do so at this time. Kakashi informed the broken-hearted Jonin. It didn't really matter. Kakashi was already superior and could have taken command anyway. Everyone remained alert for any other possible ambushes on the way to Tezuna's house. Kurenai already had little to say. Kakashi was trying hard not to light into Kurenai in front of the client any more than he already had. He had made some poor decisions during his first mission as a Jonin in command of a squad, which had resulted in the death of a friend, but he was in the midst of a war. There had been insufficient time to call for reinforcements, and even if time had not been an issue, a larger group would have drawn attention. He would have failed a critical mission due to the attention. He never forgave himself for making that mistake, but he did learn from it. Kurenai had more time than him to develop the necessary skills to make an informed decision, but he still made the wrong choice. Tezuna breathed a sigh of relief as they entered the door of a small rundown house. "Tsunami, I've returned home," he exclaimed. Almost immediately, a woman appeared around the corner, relieved. "Father. Thank goodness you're okay," she exclaimed, then turned to face the crowd behind him. "These are the ninja sent by Konoha to protect me," he stated. The woman regarded the group with suspicion, but chalked it up to a ninja thing that there were 4 children among them. She hoped that the bridge would be finished soon and that Gato would be deposed so that everyone could live in peace again. "Grandpa. You've arrived." A child charged at the old man after hearing a voice yell. Tezuna hugged Inari and smiled. Naruto felt a small sense of happiness as he observed the scene. He knew that with the right encouragement, Inari could grow into a very dependable man. Naturally, he'd have to put up with the brattiness until then. Naruto wondered what else had changed as the door closed behind them. He hoped it wasn't anything major, as that could cause more than just a hiccup in their plans. The tension between the 2 Jonin could be felt the next day at the bridge builder's house. Kurenai was still irritated by the tongue lashing she had received in front of the genin, as well as the way Kakashi had accused her of attempting to kill her team. Kakashi, on the other hand, was trying to keep his cool and not light into the woman again, this time in front of a large crowd of civilians. This was not the time for them to fight, and the last thing they needed was for more animosity to be visible between them and used against them later. They groaned as the genin walked downstairs, looking between the 2 Jonin. Naruto waited a few moments after sitting down and thanking Tsunami for the meal before speaking up. "Hello, Kakashi-sensei. What are our next steps? We have no idea where Zabuza is or how he is doing. Furthermore, we still have to deal with Gato and whatever else he has planned, as well as not bothering Tsunami any further, as it is difficult to keep up with one growing shinobi, let alone 4 and 2 fully grown. The last thing I want to do is abandon them after the mission is completed due to our presence. His question caught the Jonin off guard, knocking him out of his face-to-face with the Genjutsu mistress. Even Tsunami was taken aback by the question and the amount of thought the blonde had put into it regarding her family. So, I'm going to do some training with you all so that you're better prepared for what's coming. We could scout the area and look for Gado's location. From there, we'll be able to tell whether Zabuza is nearby or not. If Zabuza is not close to Gado and there appears to be little resistance from the other shinobi present, we could raid Gado's base and quickly shut him down. If there are other shinobi in the base or Zabuza is nearby, we will have to return and continue our brainstorming. He responded. Tizuna and Tsunami looked at the others as if they were insane. With the number of guards and people working for Gado, storming his base with or without shinobi was suicide. I'm going to raid Gado's house anyway. I believe he is known as a collector of rare items, which he may be able to entice people to work with him on, such as jutsu scrolls and well-known weapons. I'm curious if he has anything belonging to my family. Kurenai's curiosity was piqued when Naruto responded. When Inari stood up abruptly, catching the occupants of the room off guard, Kakashi appeared to be deep in thought. Why? You're going to die anyway. It serves no purpose. He exploded. Naruto shook his head, sad. It's too hard, it's pointless. I'm sure you thought when you were learning to walk, talk, or read. It'll never work, but you never gave up on those things, so why would you give up on living freely without fear of being seen outside? Why? When compared to the value of human life, those other things are insignificant. Naruto retorted, glaring at the boy before fleeing. Tsunami sighed and turned to face the ninja. I'm sorry about him. He's been like this for a long time and it's only getting worse. There's no need to apologize. He's in mourning and depression. As things stand now, I can see why. However, he is forgetting about the things he has that many other people do not. He has food, even if it is sometimes scarce. He has a place to live, a comfortable bed to sleep in and a loving family to surround him. He's simply ignoring the important things because he can't get past his grief for whomever he's lost. Naruto said, widening her eyes. Sasuke agreed with a nod and looked out the window. That is correct. He does have items that many people would kill for. In both literal and metaphorical terms. People have previously killed over beds, homes, and food. People have killed families for reasons over which they had no control, and they have killed for no reason other than to spread the suffering. He is extremely fortunate. However, he is allowing his grief to consume him, and when that happens, you can lose yourself and become someone you will later despise. A person's grief can cause them to do things they would not have been able to do or thought they could bring themselves to do, such as murder or lash out and hurt loved ones in anger. He reflected, regretfully, on how the old him had failed to comfort the boy despite knowing better than anyone how much it hurt to see your father die. He never forgave himself for that, even after Naruto knocked him out. Tsunami looked at the young boys in front of her and saw in their eyes wisdom far beyond their years. She couldn't imagine what had happened to them to make them so knowledgeable about the subject. Yes, he will eventually come around. He just needs time and to be reminded that all hope is not lost. Kakashi made a remark. Naruto nodded wisely before assuming a solemn expression. I know this is a big request, but when we next meet Zabuza, I want to be the one to deal with him and anyone he has with him. That is, me and Sasuke. He stated. Tizuna choked on his rice, and Kurenai just managed to get her tea back into her cup. Why does Naruto exist? You are aware that you are not prepared to face any of the 7. Kakashi insisted. He owes my family something. When he accepted the Kabikirabocho, he swore an oath of loyalty. I intend to force him to keep that oath. If he doesn't and I can't handle him, I'll let you finish it, but I believe I can end the fighting between the 2 groups of shinobi without any bloodshed. I want Sasuke to accompany me because I sensed someone watching the battle back there, and I believe he has an accomplice. In that case, I might need Sasuke to keep them off my back while I talk to Zabuza about his loyalties. Naruto responded. You're nothing more than a genin. Kakashi, you can't possibly be thinking about such a risky proposition. He'd be murdered. Kurenai yelled, finally regaining her composure and finding her voice. When the Sandaime became Hokage, he was only a Chunin. Surely he wasn't prepared for the responsibilities that came with the job, and yet he's still alive 60 years later. Naruto retaliated angrily against the Jonin. Kurenai and the blonde exchanged more glares before Sasuke intervened. Whether or not that is the case, Kurenai, you must realize by now that your judgment is severely hampered by a number of factors, and as such, you have no say in this decision, especially since you are neither mine nor Naruto's Jonin. Furthermore, it is not up to you to determine whether rank denotes skill or not. I believe you should learn to think before speaking. He snarled, surprising everyone. Sasuke had never been more venomous or disrespectful to a superior before. Naruto, on the other hand, mentally groaned as he realized Sasuke's loyalty was kicking in and that if he didn't calm down soon, he would accidentally call him Hokage-sama. Sasuke. Enough. Naruto yipped. Those 2 words were enough to calm the Uchiha, who sat back, apologizing but still staring at the woman in front of him. Kurenai was left speechless by their interaction, and Kakashi began to wonder even more about their connection. Kurenai, Sasuke is correct. That is my decision. I understand your concern, but given that you have forgotten what the 3 of us accomplished previously, I believe you have a very short memory. Naruto, regardless of rank, is a formidable shinobi. At the rate he's growing, I doubt he won't be stronger than me in a matter of months. Furthermore, Sasuke had grown at the same rate, and Hinata's progress had been astounding. I believe that the 3 of them working together could defeat Zabuza in combat. I'm still concerned about your safety in this situation, but I'll let you confront Zabuza under certain conditions. 1. You only fight Zabuza when I'm not around. He began, and Naruto nodded. He had to admit that convincing Kakashi to agree to the request was easier than he had anticipated. 2. If you are seriously injured, you must retreat. I know that a serious wound is child's play for you given your unique ancestry, but I won't take any chances. Even you, I doubt you could survive without your head. 3. I have the authority to intervene if it appears that you are losing the battle and will not be able or willing to retreat. 4. If you or Sasuke become incapacitated in any way, I will take over the fight. Understood? Sasuke relaxed slightly as Naruto nodded. They were somewhat confident that Zabuza and Haku would survive. Particularly if they were the ones who fought them. They had been concerned that the copy Nin would refuse the proposal, but now that he had, they felt some relief. After finishing their meal, they waited for the Jonin to rise and followed him out of the room, Kurenai receiving orders to remain with Tazuna. Elsewhere. How are they doing? Bad. I'll need more supplies soon to make more salve. At this rate, the wounds may never heal completely. There will almost certainly be some minor scarring. That was hardly a direct hit. Those 3 are extremely dangerous. That blonde, in particular. Zabuza bemoaned. He had never expected anyone to have such a powerful combination jutsu as they did. He expected the copy ninja to be a problem, but the kids caught him off guard. He was also slightly offended. During the fight, Kakashi hadn't even used his Sharingan once. That meant he hadn't seen him as a significant enough threat to use it. He had heard that the man had grown weaker over the years due to grief, but he appeared to be much stronger than he had been. He sighed, flinching as he adjusted in bed, knowing it would be at least a week before he could even consider lifting the Kabikirabocho again. They're damned. Kakashi is back. How far have you gotten with your chakra control exercises, Shino? Kakashi inquired as soon as they were sufficiently removed from the house. I've mastered tree climbing and am currently practicing water walking. However, it appears that I am having some difficulties with it. Aburame acknowledged. He was almost embarrassed by how far behind his classmates he appeared to be. Kakashi nodded and turned to face Hinata. Try to assist Shino in mastering the water walking so that we can move on to the next phase. I also want you and Sasuke to start working on combining your elements. The distance you travel will tell me if you have enough yang chakra to manifest into a more complex element. Naruto in particular. Kakashi gave the order, and the four began working on their individual assignments. Shino quickly discovered what he was doing wrong with Hinata's assistance and had the water walking mastered to Kakashi's approval in an hour. Kakashi immediately tested Shino's chakra type. Given the delicate nature of Shino's Kikai insects, not even Kakashi was prepared for the results. That's quite intriguing. You have two chakras, fire and earth. You might be able to use the lava release if your yang is high enough. Kakashi made a remark. Sasuke grinned at the bug user. Hello and welcome to the club. This team has almost all of the same chakra types. Okay, we'll help you train. Kakashi laughed as the four quickly distracted themselves by working on their chakra natures and ignoring his presence. He didn't mind because it meant he could do some reading. Almost a week had passed with no news of the swordsman or success in scouting for Gato until Naruto had a shadow clone follow Gato's thugs back to their base. It dispelled and returned the information to the original as soon as it did a quick inventory of the number of people present and the current lack of a shinobi present. I found him, Naruto said over lunch. The shinobi turned to face him, smirking at Kurenai's stunned expression. He lives in a mansion to the north of here. It is fairly well fortified against bandits and civilians. He is mostly about quantity over quality. There were no shinobi present at the time my clone was dispelled. Zabuza is nowhere to be found. Furthermore, my clone noted the locations of several vaults, some of which were more secure than others. In his office, he has a room full of headbands from various countries and several account books. Gato appears to have several legitimate businesses in addition to his illegal ones. I believe any shinobi artifacts he has are in one of the vaults. I believe we should attack the mansion before confronting Zabuza because the headbands could belong to other shinobi he has hired in the past and then killed to avoid paying them. Perhaps trophies. Naruto filled in the blanks. Sasuke gave a nod. He was familiar with the area. He was also familiar with the general layout. How many people are we talking about, and are there any non-combatants? Kakashi insisted. A few non-combatants have been detained, but they are being held in the basement. They appear to be held hostage for the most part. More victims for his human trafficking ring, perhaps. There are at least 100 bandits and about 20 ronin to contend with. As I previously stated, there were no discernible shinobi. Naruto responded. Kakashi sat quietly for a few moments before turning to face Shino. Have you gotten your first kill? Tizuna shivered at the reminder that shinobi were assassins and killers because of the calm manner in which he asked the question. "No," was the curt response. Kakashi had noticed that Kurenai had been doing a piss-poor job while training with him, and Shino had never realized how little he was improving until this mission. "I see. Tonight we'll raid the mansion. Shino, when we go in, I want you to stay with Hinata. Naruto, before we leave, I want you to start stringing traps with your clones. Once your clones are complete, I want Sasuke to devise a distraction so that the traps can kill as many as possible before we attack. Your clones are to go down to the captives and keep them safe. Then we go in and kill all the bandits. We can't let them take a hostage. But keep Gato alive." Kakashi laid out for the genin, who nodded in agreement. Shino wasn't sure how he felt about killing everyone, but he knew that if they didn't, the bandits would most likely take their frustrations out on the villagers. "Kurenai, you must remain here and protect Tazuna. Naruto and I will leave some shadow clones to help. I doubt Zabuza will show up tonight, but we can't be certain." He gave the order. The Genjutsu mistress did nothing but nod. She hadn't been saying much since Sasuke had blown up at her. After finishing their meals, the genin went about checking their supplies instead of training, and the house fell silent. After a few hours, Naruto nodded and dispatched the clones. It was only a matter of time until the raid began. The night was peaceful, if a little darker than the bandits would have preferred. Guard duty was often monotonous because no one was brave enough to attack Gato. Just as he was about to fall asleep, a loud explosion rang out from the other side of the mansion, and warning sirens began to sound. The fact that someone had been bold enough to attack was foreign to the guards as they all began to move towards the explosion. If they had had the light of the moon, they might have noticed the shinobi thread on the ground. They might not have set off the traps. Yusuke cursed the timing as he ran to the source of the explosion. He was about to go to the bathroom and didn't want to deal with any intruders right now. He only had a split second to realize his foot had caught on something before a hail of kunai and shuriken embedded themselves into his skin. The men who had been following him froze at the sight. That proved to be their undoing as the exploding tags on the handles began to detonate one by one, echoing down the corridors. Except for the echoes of the other traps, no sounds could be heard down another corridor. It might have been deserted if it hadn't been for the corpses littering the corridors and a slew of senbon littering the floor and walls. Many of them have a slightly off green color to them. There was no blood, no explosions, just the silence of a silent death. The death caused by a lethal poison. As many of the hired help frantically tried to respond to the first attack, a slew of traps were set off one after the other throughout the compound. Following several more explosions, the bandits were trampling each other in an attempt to escape the mansion alive. What they discovered at the exits, however, was nothing but death. What they had known as a safe haven had suddenly turned into a prison, with death visiting every cell. As the first wave of panicked bandits fled for the exit, Shino quickly dispatched a wave of insects to deal with them as he drew a kunai and darted in, hoping to keep it together as he ended one life after another. Hinata's arrows flew true in the trees above him, providing even more distanced support. It was strange how quickly the traps were set off and how accurate Naruto's predictions were in estimating how long it would take for pandemonium to take over. They were no longer thinking logically. They only wanted to live. Unfortunately, they had chosen the wrong line of work, as they were quickly eliminated. The raid ended as quickly as it began when no more enemies emerged from the building and everything fell silent once more. Shadow Fox is my name. All of the traps have been set. The only survivors are holed up on the third floor in Gato's office. There are still 4 bandits and 3 Ronin. Civilians have been relocated to safety. Naruto's voice came through the headset Aburame was wearing. Okay, team, let's go. But be careful, I don't want to set off any of their defenses. Affirmative. The response was unanimous. There was silence as the groups made their way through the building. There was no need for words. With Naruto and Sasuke. When it happened, Sasuke and Naruto were walking towards Gado's office from the southern end of the building. A massive explosion erupted from beneath their feet. As the floor collapsed beneath them, Sasuke grabbed Naruto's hand and threw him back up to the stable floor, quickly activating his Sharingans in the hopes of using Susanoo to mitigate the impact. They had been separated, and Sasuke was not pleased with their situation. He needed to find a way to reconnect with his Hokage. He narrowed his eyes as he stood. First and foremost, I must deal with him. As he looked at the man in front of him, he thought to himself. He had no idea how the Dobi had missed him, but despite his appearance as a normal civilian, Sasuke's instincts were screaming a shinobi. I certainly did not expect to find the Uchiha survivor. You also appeared to be a skilled Sharingan user. You're quite the prodigy, aren't you? The man mocked. Sasuke simply narrowed his eyes and hoped the Rokudame would be fine without him. Naruto cursed as the dust settled, realizing that the ceiling had caved in after the explosion and the hole had been covered up. He hadn't expected Sasuke to throw him out of harm's way so quickly. His promise to look after him was bearing fruit. He kept his promise, Minato, he thought to his unborn child. Even though he knew he was here to make things better for his children, he felt bad leaving them behind in such a way. However, not only would they not have survived the jutsu, but they would have ceased to exist because they had no form in the past. Shaking his head, he narrowed his eyes at the man stepping out of the wall. The man in front of him was unmistakable. I got a miniature Yondaime, how cute. The man mocked. Naruto's eyes narrowed as rage welled up in his chest. How has life been treating you since you betrayed Uzu? He inquired of the stranger. The smile faded and was replaced by a glare. Who are you, and how did you find out? I know a lot of things, Uncle Ryusuke, especially about Uzu's fall and your role in it. I know a lot of things, Uncle Ryusuke, especially about Uzu's fall and your role in it. Naruto snarled at the man in front of him. Naruto tried to contact his friend through the link that had been established some time before, as the redhead's face scrunched in concentration. That's not good. Either the link is broken or he isn't listening, Naruto cursed to himself. Who the hell are you? Grumbled the man. You are really stupid. To think you got away with betraying Uzu for so long. Tell me how that worked out for you? I suppose no one knows about your betrayal though. How did you keep that secret? Clearly you couldn't find a new village if you are here as a Nuke Nin. Naruto retorted. Uncle? Kushina had a child? Exclaimed the man, surprised. As he drew his sword, Naruto smirked sadistically at the man. Yeah, she did. Interesting, isn't it? Although I was hoping to run into you sooner or later. Honestly, I was hoping for later when I was more versed in our family's jutsu, but now works for me. Ryusuke said nothing as the blonde in front of him drew the blade at his side. He had never expected Kushina, of all people, to have a child. He couldn't imagine her settling down because she was so self-sufficient. Yet here was the proof in front of him. However, he bore no resemblance to the Uzumaki family. Was the boy telling the truth? He had no choice. I have no idea who you are, and I don't care. You're going to die right here for attacking this place, Ryusuke snarled, drawing his own blade. You don't care about much, do you? You didn't care about your home or your family, did you? Naruto responded. After a brief moment of silence, the two vanished from view, and the only sound heard was the clashing of swords. The fight had begun between the two Uzumaki, together with Sasuke. The two shinobi in the room remained completely motionless. Since the initial remarks, no words had passed, and none appeared to be passing anytime soon. The two were still waiting for the other to make a move when they heard the sound of steel on steel. "So Ryusuke has started dealing with the blonde brat, huh?" sneered Sasuke's opponent. "Ryusuke? Uzumaki?" Sasuke inquired, piqued the man's interest. "I'm surprised you know that name. What does it mean to you?" "Not much to me, but for the blonde brat, it means everything." "Looks like the Dobi got his wish much sooner than expected," Sasuke said as he straightened himself and began to brush the dust off of him. The man twitched in annoyance at the obvious lack of interest. He'd known the Uchiha could be arrogant and proud, having fought a few himself, but this was something else. What did he wish for sooner rather than later? "The Dobi gets to kill the Spiral's traitor, his uncle," Sasuke said calmly as he dusted off the rest of his clothes. The man's eyes widened as he spoke. Was the blonde Ryusuke's nephew? That couldn't be true. When the attack occurred, everyone in Uzu died. Ryusuke made certain of it. It was always a fascinating story to hear from the swordsman. To consider the possibility that he had overlooked a survivor. "By the way, you're not Maros the Mantis, are you?" Sasuke asked absent-mindedly. "What's the big deal? Wouldn't the Mantis part be for your summoning contract with Mantises? What's your point?" "I think a Mantis summoning contract would make a good gift for a friend of mine," Sasuke said, as if expecting the man to hand over his summoning. Maro snarled, "Are you always this arrogant?" "It's not arrogance if you can back it up," a famous Uchiha said. "By separating me from the rest of my team, you have only ensured that I can fight all out, so in the end you only sealed your demise." Sasuke replied as he reached behind him and drew his sword. Maro's eyes narrowed and then widened in shock, barely able to lift his kunai in time to parry the slash aimed at his head. Shisui Uchiha, Minato Namikaze, of the Yondaime Reikage, and Tobarama Senju, the Naidem Hokage, were the only people known to move at that speed. Nonetheless, this genin of all people had just moved at speeds comparable to theirs. This would not be a simple battle. Hinata and Shino. Shino found the nighttime silence that accompanied the massacre eerie, and he had hoped that this part of the mission would be over soon. When another explosion echoed through the night, his wish was granted, but not in the way he had hoped. Hinata quickly scanned the area with her Byakugans and discovered the source. "Do you copy this lavender fox?" Hinata asked through her headset. "Go ahead," Kakashi said, echoing back. It appears that some enemies either moved in after Shadow Fox finished his surveillance or managed to hide from him. Shadow Fox and Hawk are currently engaged in separate battles, each fighting one opponent, and both seem to be holding their own at the moment, Hinata reported to her sensei. For a few moments, there was silence before his voice returned. "I see, proceed with caution. I highly doubt they will be in any danger. Continue to monitor the situation and, if necessary, head to their location to provide backup. I am too far away to be of any use to them right now. I will continue with the objective. I'll get back to you," Kakashi said, interrupting his own sentence. Another quick check revealed that the Jonin had been ambushed as well. "Can you send some of your Kikai ahead to scout for us?" Hinata asked, directing the Abarame's gaze to the end of the corridor. A tall woman stood at the end, sneering at them. "Lovely," Shino said, summarizing the situation. Hinata had no choice but to agree. Should I have the honor of knowing the names of my prey, or should I just call you both pests and call it a day?" She mocked. Neither shinobi responded as they tensely prepared for battle. "Have it your way then," she said as she charged forward. Together with Kakashi. "I see, proceed with caution. I highly doubt they will be in any danger. Continue to monitor the situation and, if necessary, head to their location to provide backup. I am too far away to be of any use to them right now. I will continue with the objective. I'll get back to you," the Jonin said, his eyes narrowing at the man slowly emerging from the ground. Copy Ninja Kakashi. Who'd have guessed I'd get the strongest of the rats? Guro the Unyielding. Interesting to meet you here. I would have thought you'd still be hiding from the hunter Nin after you, Kakashi countered, turning the man red. He'd only said one thing, but it was condescending. "You have a lot of guts coming here, Hitaki," he grumbled. "Do I have the nerve to come here to finish a mission?" Kakashi asked, making Guro twitch. Despite the fact that he had only repeated the sentence back to him, he had made him sound stupid. "You little. You know what? I'm going to kill you right now," he rushed forward. Kakashi brought his knee up and buried it into Goro's abdomen, easily deflecting the straight punch. He looked over at him in boredom as he proceeded to knock the man away. "Can we take off the kid gloves, or am I going to have to walk you through this battle?" Kakashi inquired, genuinely interested. As the man struggled to catch his breath, the red returned. Rumor had it that Kakashi had weakened over the years, but now that he was fighting him, Guro had to disagree. The copy Nin had only grown stronger. He had the impression that he was simply out of his league. He was too enraged to care, however, as he began to surround himself in chakra. He was going to kill the arrogant jerk if it was the last thing he did. "Naruto is back. Is that all you have, uncle? I would have thought that someone who would willingly destroy his home would be a little, stronger." Naruto asked, his gaze fixed on the man in front of him. Ryusuke was on his knees, struggling to catch his breath. The kid was better than he had anticipated. Despite the fact that he claimed to be an Uzumaki and had not received much clan training, he was far too skilled with his sword. "Who are you really?" he demanded. "There is no way that someone who hasn't gotten that far with their lessons could fight on par with an elite like me." "Elite?" snorted Naruto before breaking out laughing. "I've fought plants and corpses stronger than you. How do you consider yourself an elite? You conceited little jerk. Hey, I met my father. Even if it wasn't for long, I met him." Naruto yelled angrily. Ryusuke groaned after blinking. His opponent had morphed from a serious shinobi to a small child. "Are you even mentally stable?" he deadpanned. Well, in all honesty, hearing voices usually indicates a mental illness of some kind, and most people who suffer from those disorders are deemed unstable, and I can hear 9 of them. "No, I am not," Naruto deadpanned back. Both Uzumaki exchanged a brief glance before returning to the fight. Neither was willing to give up, but only one was unwilling to admit defeat. Naruto knew he had to be cautious around the man because he was much stronger than he let on. He was also aware that the man could not be trusted. After all, he had caused the destruction of their home village. The battle raged on, with neither side willing to budge an inch as they focused on not giving their opponent an opening. The air was thick with tension as the two battled, and for a brief moment, it appeared that neither would budge. Naruto was used to being obstinate in battle. After all, it was the way he defeated Neji, Gaara, and Kagaya. He never gave up, even though he wanted to sleep during some of the battles to relieve some of the fatigue. The building was trembling as they fought due to the intensity of the other battles going on around them. Naruto looked over at his uncle as he separated to regroup and rethink his battle strategy. He was truly living up to his name. "Don't you think this battle has lasted long enough, brat?" Ryusuke asked the blonde, who stood and fixed him with a cold stare. "I believe you have taken one too many breaths," he retorted. Then again, given that we're both Uzumaki, this battle could go on indefinitely, Naruto explained to the traitor in front of him. "Back up? Don't make me laugh. Maro, Guro, and Hiyari are already dealing with them. You're alone, kid, you lost." "Maro the Mantis, huh? Looks like Shino will be getting a new summoning contract after this mission," Naruto remarked casually. Then he smirked as an afterthought. "Especially if Maro is fighting the Teme down below," Ryusuke scoffed, blinking at the genin's blind faith in his friend. "You know how overconfident you are." "No, I just have a reason to fight and a reason to win and walk out of here, unlike you." Naruto snapped and shot forward, eager to end the battle. If he was right about his team's luck and Hiyari was who he thought she was, Hinata was in danger, and he wasn't going to let her get hurt or die before he could say anything. He refused to let her go. Ryusuke, on the other hand, had not anticipated the sudden burst of speed and had barely jumped out of the way of a fatal attack. He was unable to completely avoid the attack, however, and received a semi-deep wound in his chest. The blonde had been holding back and hadn't been serious at all, he realized. "Fine, if that's how you want it, then I won't hold back either." Naruto kept his gaze steady, not reacting to the news that his opponent had been holding back. "Bring it. Ryusuke the Dragon Tamer," Naruto said calmly. "Once I defeat you and you die, I will be able to claim our clan's dragon contract from you." Ryusuke growled and shattered the seals that had bound his power. He had no intention of holding anything back. The battle had escalated to a new level, and it was about to become explosive. Sasuke's fight. Neither side was willing to budge, and it was most likely a deadlock. Each knew that one slip-up would almost certainly be their undoing. Neither of them was willing to take that risk. In silence, Sasuke and Maro stared at each other, waiting for the other to move. They had been staring at each other silently after their initial attacks had been parried or dodged. Both understood the importance of patience. Unfortunately, only one of them was able to keep their cool. "I believe it is past time to put an end to this Uchiha. Be my guest and try. Honestly, I'm a little bored." "I get more of a challenge from Sensei's water clones," Sasuke said, completely bored. Maro moved quickly to catch Sasuke off guard, only to be knocked backwards through a wall. He sat up, groaning, just in time to avoid a fireball heading his way. When he jumped to the side, he was met with Sasuke's grin as his foot made contact with his side. Normally, an attack like that from an equally leveled opponent would not have sent him very far, but Sasuke had amplified the kick with his chakra, sending the man flying not only through the wall but also out of the building. He moved quickly after the man, sending him further away from the mansion and deeper into the woods. Maro was enraged. The kid had outmaneuvered him in some way, which was somewhat embarrassing. He regained his footing and began leaping through the trees, dodging fireballs as he went. He was hoping to lose the boy in the woods, but that was quickly proving to be impossible. Until he noticed that the fireballs were barely aiming at him. Was he just shooting them in any direction? Was he attempting to set fire to the forest? He came to a halt in a tree hollow, waiting for the Uchiha to dart by. The longer he waited, however, the more paranoid he became when the Uchiha failed to appear. Maro would have noticed the sky filling with thunderclouds if he had been paying attention. Together with Kakashi. The fight hadn't been all that difficult. In his opinion, Guro the Unyielding yielded far too quickly for someone known as Guro the Unyielding. Kakashi spent most of the battle baiting the man into reckless attacks and capitalizing on them. However, as he gazed down at the headless shinobi, his thoughts returned to the man's last words. Does Hiyari really exist? The man sighed, turning his back on the now smoldering man in front of him. He needed to find his students quickly. The room then filled with a massive amount of light. Rushing to the window, he watched as a massive dragon crashed down from the storm clouds, vaporizing a vast amount of forest and ground. Kakashi groaned, knowing that the only person who would cause such wanton destruction to end a battle would be Sasuke. He had no idea how he had done it. He was going to ask, but that attack looked incredible. Hinata and Shino were holding their own against the woman who had attacked them for the most part. She was an odd shinobi with no apparent pattern or form to her style. Fortunately for Hinata, she had prior experience fighting Naruto's more unpredictable styles. Despite being so far behind his classmates, Shino seemed to be keeping up with the battle fairly well. They were, however, wearing down faster than she was, which was a problem. I need a favor from you, Shino. Hinata spoke quietly to her comrade. I'm paying attention. I've been playing around with my Juken style. I haven't mastered it, but since she appears to be a close-range fighter, it appears to be the best option. However, it is not yet perfected, so I will need to be covered and have a few minutes to gather the chakra required for this specific variation. She spoke to her mostly silent companion. I'll do my best, but try not to take too long. Standing, he said. With his current level, he knew he could only buy her a minute or two. Another story would be how hurt he would be in the end. Nodding, Hinata stepped out of sight and focused her chakra. She despised asking Shino for such a risky favor, but she desperately needed some time. She would give them a fighting chance if she could pull off the new variation. As difficult as it was for her, she had to force all other thoughts from her mind. Naruto-kun, we could really use your help right now, she thought. Naruto, for example. Since the traitor mentioned Hiyari was in the mansion, the battle with Ryusuke had been one-sided. Naruto had given Ryusuke no time to counterattack. It was all the older Uzumaki could do to keep a fatal wound from happening. Without warning, the boy had tripled his speed and strength. He jumped back to put some distance between them, trying to think of a way to create an opening to turn the tide of the battle. The mansion began to shake violently as a loud explosion could be heard. Naruto smirked and raised an eyebrow. Wasn't it Maro who was fighting the Teme down below? What's the big deal? I'm sorry to inform you that he has passed away. Only one technique could have caused that explosion. Nobody has ever survived that method. Naruto informed him. Well, except for Itachi, he reflected. To think he'd succumb to a genin. Pathetic. As you may have noticed, we aren't exactly genin. Naruto shivered as he looked at his uncle. Ryusuke just smirked and glared. While training under his dragon summons, he had managed to gather the necessary chakra for the technique he had created. Nephew or not, I believe it is time for me to die. Ryusuke spoke as his body was enveloped in a silver sheen of chakra. The force released by it was enormous, and Naruto gritted his teeth. He hadn't felt anything like this since the Jubi had been resurrected. His uncle was in front of him before he could blink. The force of the blow to his face propelled him through the wall and outside the mansion, with little to no resistance from the walls. He cursed as he crashed to the ground and skidded for a few feet. That was excruciatingly painful. That was his phantom dragon armor, then. He can increase his speed astronomically while increasing the force of his attacks, similar to A's lightning armor. It will almost certainly have an effect on his ninjutsu as well. As he stood shakily, Naruto thought to himself. When he looked up, he noticed his uncle smirking at him. "Do you enjoy it? Armor of the Phantom Dragon." That was extremely painful. Naruto sheathed his sword. It was no longer useful in this fight. "Kurama, is it still possible to use your chakra the way I used to?" "No more than a minute. You have a long way to go before you can use it freely again." "I'd say 30 seconds if you use the Rasen Shuriken." Naruto groaned as the fox responded. He wasn't sure he could finish this quickly. He also knew that gathering Senjutsu in 5 minutes was impossible. He had no other option but to try. Ryusuke paused as he took a step forward to see the blonde suddenly encase himself in a golden chakra similar to his armor. While his was refined and barely visible, Naruto's was almost dripping off his body. Without warning, the blonde appeared in front of him, and he was the one who was sent sailing. As he managed to catch himself and land on his feet, skidding back a few feet, he growled, his eyes widening comically as he looked at his blood relation. That could not have been created by anyone other than an Uzumaki. Kakashi. The Jonin pushed himself through the halls, towards Hinata and Shino's last known location. Neither was prepared to face the remaining 3. He also knew that with their teamwork, they could stall and eventually overpower 2 of the 3. Hiyari, what exactly is she doing here? How on earth is she still alive? How come now? He reflected to himself. Another explosion drew his attention, but he forced himself to continue walking. If the first was Sasuke, the second was unquestionably Naruto. That meant there was only one left, right? With his luck, it was her. He could only hope that the 2 genin would be able to defend themselves against the mistress of torture. Hinata and Shino are back. Shino gritted his teeth and summoned his Kikai back to him as he was knocked back again. She was even more powerful than he had anticipated. He had reached his limit and hoped that the minute and a half he had bought Hinata would suffice. She was knocked back, howling in pain, just as she appeared in front of him. She had no time to recover as Hinata launched her initial attack. Shino was pleasantly surprised. Her fingertips were filled with chakra as well as both of her elemental natures. Each Juken strike sent fire and lightning chakra through the woman's tenketsu, almost certainly causing irreparable damage to each point struck. She'd taken the style that her family was known for and made it even more dangerous. Hinata, on the other hand, was gritting her teeth and attacking her opponent. The chakra natures were difficult to maintain on their own, and she was attempting to use all 128 palms before mastering the technique. With Naruto's help, she had made tremendous progress with her family's style, and as a result, she was already learning the advanced techniques of her clan. Of course, she had concealed her progress from her family in order to surprise them once she had mastered it. The combination of fire and lightning was not only damaging the tenketsu, but it was also damaging the nerve endings in the general vicinity of each tenketsu. If done correctly, the victim will be unable to do much for a short period of time after the technique connects and will never be able to use chakra again. It was a last-ditch effort she devised for this specific situation. For when she didn't have her team's support or the luxury of fighting long distance. She jumped back next to Shino, panting from exertion after landing the final strike. "Sorry for the delay. I'm still having trouble putting the 2 elements together." She expressed regret. Shino simply shook his head, amused. "Only you would apologize for using an impressive technique to buy us some breathing room, if not end the battle," he responded, causing the girl to blush. She winced as she looked down the corridor at the fallen girl. Do you believe it's over? I certainly hope so. I don't think we can keep fighting her for much longer. Shino murmured. They were both tired and hurt. If she got up, neither of them would be able to stop her. Furthermore, despite the technique's appearance of being simple and gentle on the chakra reserves, it was not. Hinata wouldn't be able to do it again, and the only reason she was able to do it in the first place was because she had used her lightning element to accelerate herself. That hurt. You bitch. Snarled the woman as she struggled to her feet. Hinata shivered slightly as the enraged woman succeeded. Why can't I move properly? The snarl had seemed to grow more vicious. How do you keep moving? Hinata made a squeak. My name is Ninja. This is meaningless. I'm going to kill you and have a good time doing it. She was singing. I think I'll start by removing your eyes, little bird. Then I'll sever your fingers. She burst out laughing. Hinata and Shino flinched at the tone and began devising a strategy. The woman was obviously insane and dangerous, but to think she was that unstable. As she moved forward, the wall next to her exploded, engulfing her in a massive stream of fire. Her screams were unsettling, and both genin knew they would have nightmares as a result. As the figures stepped through the hole, Hinata breathed a sigh of relief as the fire died down. Naruto-kun. Sasuke-san. Are you alright, Hinata, Shino? Naruto expressed concern. Nodding to their worried comrade, Hinata began to cry as Naruto wrapped his arms around her. It's all right, Hinaheim. He whispered, not realizing he had used the pet name he had given her when they first started dating. He soothed her whimper into his shoulder by rubbing her back. Who exactly was she? Shino inquired quietly. Hiyari, the torture mistress. She was a Sanagakure nuke nin who specialized in torture. Unfortunately, she was also unstable and quickly began torturing civilians. When the Kazekage learned of her crimes, he ordered that she be dealt with, believing her to be too dangerous to imprison. She managed to elude the pursuing ninja and vanish from the world. This is the first time I've heard of her in a long time. Coming up from the other side, Kakashi said. Shino's face twitched. A shinobi could hide mental instability for that long and was only caught because of the victims they chose. Knowing that someone like that existed was terrifying. Naruto, nice work, Sasuke. But don't you think that was a little excessive? He inquired of his genin. They blinked at the Cyclops as they looked up. Huh? Have you said anything? They all joined in. As he received the response that he normally gave his friend, Guy, Kakashi's sweat dropped. But never mind. Shino, Hinata, are you both ready to go? Hello, Kakashi-sensei. Shino murmured. Hinata simply nodded from Naruto's arms, and they continued through the mansion after a brief pause. Naruto and Sasuke nodded at each other, their minds made up. It wasn't long before they arrived at the office where Gato had holed up. Naruto tried not to laugh as he kicked the door in and heard it connect with several of the man's bodyguards. Hello there. Do you mind if we come in? Kakashi made a chirp. Returning to Tezuna's home. Kurenai raised her head from her watch position as she noticed the other ninja emerge from the foliage surrounding the bridge builder's house. Despite the fact that they had clearly encountered a genuine challenge, they all appeared to be in good spirits. What occurred? I thought there weren't any shinobi? She inquired out of concern for her younger sister. They either snuck in after Naruto's clone dispelled itself, or they managed to avoid detection. Kakashi told the woman. There were only 4, but unfortunately Shino and Hinata got the more unstable one. Unstable. Oh. Nay. Kurenai's eyes widened in terror. Was Hiyari there? She nearly yelled at the top of her lungs. The team as a whole flinched at the volume.
She was, indeed.
She is no longer alive. She will never be again. Naruto growled, his arm protectively wrapped around Hinata. Kurenai completely missed this. On the plus side, we got everything done, and now we all want to sleep. Sasuke sighed, exhausted. He hadn't expected the Kirin to drain him so much. He still had a lot of work ahead of him. I guess more training when we get back. Kurenai simply nodded and let the team enter quietly. She had no idea what to make of Shino and Hinata's ability to repel and survive an attack by Hiyari herself. She was beginning to believe that the rumor about Team 7 being cursed was true. Tizuna, Inari, and Tsunami looked up in surprise the next morning as the shinobi sat down to breakfast as if nothing had happened, albeit a little quieter. Inari had no idea what to think of them because he was convinced they were going to die. Gado's mansion has been demolished, and Nami should not be bothered by anyone working for him again. We have Gado in a prisoner scroll if you'd rather Nami deal with him. Tizuna choked on his breakfast as Kakashi informed his hosts. Furthermore, all of Gado's food, medical supplies, and money that rightfully belonged to Nami are contained in separate scrolls. We recovered 20% interest on all of the money you were taxed on from his personal savings and placed it in a scroll with everyone's name on it. You only need to open the scroll to free it. We will delegate the task of distributing the supplies evenly among the villagers to you. The only thing left is to defeat Zabuza. Sasuke told their hosts. Tsunami's jaw dropped open in surprise. In one night, they had undone nearly 3 years of Gado's tyranny and returned everything the man had stolen. We left the females Gado had kidnapped in the mansion with the town doctor for medical treatment, and we will request that the rest be tracked down when we return to Konoha. It remains to be seen whether the Sandaime agrees. We have repaid the fees for the false statements on the mission request, as well as the difference in the mission cost, so you do not need to worry about that. If you agree, we have enough money from Gado to pay for that mission to find the girls. Naruto murmured. He hadn't gotten enough sleep. Images of what might have happened to Hinata had plagued his dreams if he and Sasuke hadn't arrived in time to save her. The gaps between nightmares were filled with memories of how he had lost her the first time. I really appreciate it. Tizuna smiled and whispered. Naruto stood up and walked towards the door, nodding tiredly. I need to go for a walk because I'm still tired. He whispered to Kakashi, who nodded in agreement. He'd heard Naruto talking in his sleep and realized he hadn't gotten enough rest. The birds chirping and the sun shining down made the morning appear much more peaceful. A lone girl gathered herbs for her injured comrade while the sounds of nature surrounded her. The sight that greeted her as she made her way to another location was unexpected. One of the previous ninjas was sound asleep under a tree, with a rabbit next to his head and birds perching on him. She should kill him, but she is unsure whether she can after what happened to Zabuza. Morning. Naruto startled her with a whisper. I don't sleep well. I could hear your footsteps. He said, raising her eyebrows. I see. How come you're sleeping out here? I couldn't sleep all night, so I went for a walk and fell asleep here after a brief sit. He responded truthfully. He'd completely forgotten about the meeting. I see. Do you want to help me collect herbs? Naruto stretched and, as he had done before, assisted Haku in gathering the herbs she needed to heal Zabuza. The conversation was mostly the same as well. She smiled at the boy as she stood up to leave. I'm a young man. She had lied. Naruto smirked with delight. You are not. I have a keen sense of smell and can tell you're a lady. You have just finished your menstrual cycle. Anyway, could you do me a favor? Tell Zabuza that Naruto is excited to fight him again, this time one-on-one. He warned against shining out of the clearing. Haku's eyes widened as she ran back to the hideout. How could he have known? In 2 days, Zabuza will be ready and at the bridge. Naruto notified his team. Everyone looked up in surprise. Wait, I thought you went for a walk? Kurenai almost yelled. He rolled his eyes. Naruto took a seat. I did. In the woods, I ran into his companion. Given the herbs gathered and the damage we inflicted on him, he'll be fighting fit in 2 days. With a knowing smile, Naruto said. Sasuke gave himself a nod. He'd always wanted to fight Yuki again. This time, Sasuke, Haku as a girl. He murmured to his friend, causing Sasuke to blink in confusion. But wasn't Haku a boy? Perhaps. That's what Haku said, but I didn't have nearly as much experience with my sense of smell back then to tell if he was telling the truth. This time, I'm certain. He replied, making Sasuke mentally hum. I see. Kurenai will accompany Tazuna to the bridge just in case, and we will rest up for Zabuza. Kakashi knew they'd need at least another day of rest before they were ready to fight. We need to talk, Kakashi-sensei. Shino is welcome. In a private setting. As soon as the bridge builder and Kurenai left, Naruto said. They went upstairs after Kakashi nodded. As soon as the door was shut, security seals were applied, and everyone turned to stare expectantly at Naruto. Last night, Sasuke and I agreed that you and Shino would be told the truth. You deserved it. Naruto Uzumaki is not me. He motioned for Kakashi to return to his seat. I am Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the Rokudame Hokage of 31 years. We're the only 2 survivors of Konohagakure no Sato. The room fell silent as the 2 who didn't know tried to process what they had just heard. What? Kakashi finally managed to ask. As a direct result of the 5th Shinobi War, the Dobi and I are the only survivors of the Hidden Leaf. Unfortunately, Konoha was left alone in the end as a result of nearly a century of bad decisions in Nuke Nin. Sasuke went on. Even Shino was perplexed by what was being said. I spent years developing a seal that would allow me to travel back in time and alter history. However, after a particularly painful incident, I asked Sasuke to accompany me. I needed help, and as my oldest friend, I knew he'd be able to assist. That, and the fact that I was the only one with enough reserves to do the seal with you. Sasuke added that he made Naruto stick his tongue out. Team 7 consisted of Kakashi-sensei, Sasuke, Sakura, and myself in the original timeline. Kurenai, Hinata, Shino, and Kiba made up Team 8. Team 7 was the first to receive the Nami mission, and things did not go well. No one from our team died, except for Zabuza and Haku. They would have been useful in the 4th war if they had lived. Unfortunately, they did not, and as a result, they became the enemy due to the use of the Edo Tensei. Naruto informed the others. He was giving them more information than he had previously given Hinata. To prevent the Jubi from being resurrected, we must gather as many shinobi as possible. That means we can't let potential allies die until we know whether they'll be able and willing to help. Sasuke took up the phone. After a few minutes of awkward silence, Kakashi found his voice. What? Kakashi and Shino were speechless as they stared at the two entities before them. What do you say when you discover that two people you thought you knew were time travelers? Kakashi was trying to organize his thoughts. He'd never considered time travel as one of the things the two of them had been keeping from the village. However, being so much older and war veterans would explain the drastic change in their level of skill and maturity since academy graduation. If Hinata had known about this ahead of time, or at least some of it, she wouldn't have been as concerned about the change in behavior. It would also explain why her skill set had grown much faster than he had expected. He closed his eyes and began to consider the outcome of every possible response to these claims, as well as what he would tell the Sandaime when he returned. Shino, on the other hand, was analyzing them and communicating with his Kikai. They would have picked it up if they had lied or fibbed at any point in the story. He honestly didn't know what to say about the possibility that the two had returned to avert, for all intents and purposes, the end of the world. He had always regarded Sasuke and Naruto as practical-ish in Naruto's case, and forthright with their emotions. He couldn't understand why the two of them would lie about something so important. Furthermore, it appeared as if one of them had already informed Hinata of this. That told him they were scrutinizing everyone around them for trustworthiness. While that wasn't necessarily a bad thing given what they were up against, it did indicate to him that there were people in the village who couldn't be trusted. Maybe even in their graduating class. He looked at the two he had come to know as friends, nodding to himself. So, is there anything I can do to help? The question caught them off guard, but they quickly recovered and smiled cheerfully at the Aburame. Naruto was overjoyed that they could rely on the Aburame for assistance with their self-imposed mission. Meanwhile, Sasuke realized that it would be easier to complete their tasks if they had more people working with them. I honestly don't know what to say. Sensei was a genius when it came to fuinjutsu and jutsu creation, but even he thought that creating any form of time travel was impossible. However, he also taught me that nothing is impossible as long as you keep trying, which you have already proven to me, Naruto.
If things had continued as they were without you returning, would you have even passed your test?
Kakashi finally said. Naruto laughed slightly. Yes and no. I would have failed the official test, but Mizuki would have tricked me into stealing the scroll of sealing, which would have led to me discovering Kyuubi and eventually being allowed to pass by the Sandaime. I would still be on Team 7, but instead of Hinata, we would have had Sakura. Hinata would have been on Team 8 with Kiba and Shino. Yes, you would still have had Kurenai, Naruto admitted. Shino sighed. He could only imagine how weak his future self was in comparison to Naruto and Sasuke if this was what they could do in their younger, less trained bodies. I see. Well, that's quite interesting. How far did you get with that team? Kakashi finally inquired. Honestly, I never made it past Genin. I was made Hokage after the Godai passed away because all of the other candidates were already dead, Naruto said, surprising the group in front of him. In fact, it wasn't until I became Hokage that Sasuke moved past Genin as well. Why would they? Hinata began, then paused, wide-eyed. Were they retarded because of Kyuubi? Her outburst startled everyone in the room, and Naruto stared at the heiress open-mouthed. He'd never heard her yell like that before, let alone insult someone. Next to him, Sasuke was also struggling to regain his composure. Shino had initially jumped, but Naruto could hear his Kikai buzzing angrily at the thought of being held back for something he couldn't control. Kind of. Yeah, Naruto shrugged. Hinata shockedly stared at the boy before palming his face. How could you still be loyal after knowing that? It was home, and not much was known about the Biju or how they affected the Jinchuriki, and I was a baby when they sealed the Kyuubi inside of me, and the only person I knew of who had the Biju sealed that young had mental stability issues due to a faulty seal, Naruto said almost sarcastically. He was angry about the decisions, but he also understood why. That didn't mean he agreed with it or would have made the same choice, but he did understand some of it. Shino exclaimed, "Sometimes you can be too naive and kind-hearted for your own good." Naruto just scratched the back of his head and laughed sheepishly. "So, why did they confine you, Sasuke?" Kakashi inquired. Sasuke twitched slightly, but he had already decided to be truthful about the situation. "I left the village to train under the traitor Orochimaru, nearly killed 5 genin and 1 chunin of the Hidden Leaf in an attempt to bring me back, betrayed Oro 3 years later and then killed my brother, then joined a terrorist organization trying to capture the Biju in order to destroy Konoha, attacked the Raikage's brother and the Cage Summit, then decided to betray the organization and return to Konoha and fight against them." Sasuke Kakashi was staring at his student with his mouth open, unsure what to say. In Sasuke's defense, he admitted he acted rashly and stupidly and was willing to accept any punishment that the village saw fit for his actions. It also didn't help that when he betrayed the village, he had 2 different entities trying to control him, Naruto added, looking irritably at his friend. "You had a long journey, didn't you?" Kakashi asked nervously. He'd never heard of a shinobi changing their minds so drastically in such a short period of time. "Well, the important thing is that the Dobi let me return and trusted me with an important task," Sasuke said quietly. "Even if I wasn't completely successful." "Finish that sentence, Sasuke, and I'll send you back." "You can't control the fact that the elders put you in such a bad situation, and that you were ambushed on a C-rank mission that turned into a trap." Naruto snapped his voice, changing from light-hearted to cold and authoritative in seconds. Sasuke jumped slightly before softly nodding to the blonde. When he brought up Hitomi's death, he became irritated and reminded the Uchiha that it wasn't his fault that things had turned out the way they did. "Sasuke," Kakashi began, only to have Naruto shake his head. "Just leave it at mission gone horribly wrong and leave it at that. There are a lot of things we won't tell anyone because they aren't important or would change things too much if said out loud," Naruto said, his eyes a little red. Kakashi nodded in agreement. "If you're still unsure, Sensei, just name a jutsu that we shouldn't know and if we can do it, we will," Sasuke challenged the copy nin. Kakashi narrowed his eyes as the boy looked at him with amusement. "Chidori," he countered, believing that the raven-haired boy could not have gotten access to the jutsu. Within seconds, Kakashi was staring at the Raikiri, the stronger version of the Chidori. The Jonin gaped in surprise, his mouth wide open. When Naruto looked over to confirm that it wasn't a joke, his jaw dropped open and his eyes bulged as he saw a perfect Rasengan in the blonde's hands. As they cancelled their techniques, both boys laughed at his face. "Okay, I believe you," he squeaked in surprise. "I'm glad you do. If you want to help us, you need to train to get as strong as you can in the next few months. We don't know what we're going to do to stop it or if we'll just focus on reducing casualties yet, but Orochimaru is planning an invasion during the next Chunin exams hosted in Konoha," Naruto stated solemnly. As his words sunk in, the air became thick and the tension suffocated. He knew that learning that your home was going to be attacked at both its most vulnerable and most guarded moment would come as a surprise. "Orochimaru wants my Sharingan, and he intends to use the exams to try and give me the Heaven Seal. Naruto and I are still debating whether we should let me get the seal or not. Before you say anything, Sensei, I can alter the seal to prevent it from affecting him negatively, but it does come with its own risks. The seal only has a 10% chance of survival, which is why we are still debating it." Naruto stretched while standing. "We should save this discussion for later and just focus on resting and training for now," the rest of the ninjas agreed, nodding, and mentally preparing for the upcoming battle with Zabuza. After 2 days. The team could be seen preparing for the fight on the day of the promised fight. As they finished their preparations, they nodded and went downstairs. Tsunami was in the kitchen preparing breakfast, while Inari sat quietly at the table, watching his mother. He was surprised to learn that the ninja had returned from their suicide mission. He had been taken aback when they announced that they had dealt with Gato. They had survived taking on Gato's entire army. Not only that, but they had returned with food, supplies, and money. Were they correct? Should he let go of the past and look forward to spending each day enjoying what he has? We are ready to go. Kurenai, you may come if you wish. There is no danger to the bridge builder now. Once we settle things with Zabuza, there will be no opposition to the bridge and you will be able to finish it safely. As mission protocols state, we will be staying until the bridge is finished, so don't worry about that, okay? Kakashi said as he approached the door. Tizuna nodded gratefully as the nins exited the building. They'd done more than he could have hoped for since arriving in Nami, and he wasn't sure if they'd ever be able to repay the shinobi. The journey to the bridge was quiet as the group devised various strategies to end the fight quickly. Despite what he had learned, Kakashi was still hesitant to leave the swordsman and his apprentice in the hands of Sasuke and Naruto. But he also knew he had to believe in their abilities. After all, they had invented time travel. When Kakashi arrived at the bridge, he noticed Zabuza waiting patiently in the center. Kakashi took a step forward and called out to the other man. Shall we move this battle elsewhere so that we don't damage the bridge? I don't see why we can't fight here. After we win, we'll destroy the bridge, Zabuza countered. Naruto snorted, drawing the swordsman's attention. Why destroy the bridge? You won't get paid for the mission now that Gato is dead, and raiding his mansion won't help you either. We already did that, the blonde joked before the demon could ask. Well, then, I suppose we have no reason to destroy the bridge, but then why should we fight in the first place? Zabuza wondered. You want to know what we are capable of, you want to finish the fight we had before, and you want to know why I called you out for a one-on-one fight, Naruto responded. The blonde's reading of Zabuza caused his eyes to widen slightly. He lifted his sword and followed the group away from the bridge, snorting amusement. While it was possible that they were tricking him, he doubted that they would have gone through everything they had just to end the fight with dirty tricks. The journey was brief, and when they arrived, they were far enough away from the village that no innocents would be caught up in the fighting, but close enough to return to the bridge builder quickly if necessary. Zabuza, I want to fight you alone. Kakashi-sensei has already agreed that I can. He will only step in if it looks like I am about to die. Naruto informed the ex-Jonin, who raised an eyebrow at the Cyclops. I believe in my genin. If they believe they can handle this, I will not doubt their ability. I will let them try. However, I am not willing to risk their lives, so I will step in if necessary. That is part of what being a Jonin is all about, he told Zabuza. After a brief moment, Zabuza nodded in agreement. He questioned his ability to defeat the team, but surely he could defeat the blonde, right? As the combatants stood across from each other, they attempted to formalize an attack plan. They were well aware that one wrong step would result in death. That was something Sasuke and Naruto couldn't afford to happen. All four charged at each other, as if prompted by an invisible signal, determined to end the fight quickly. However, Zabuza quickly realized that was impossible. The blonde was much faster than he had previously given him credit for. He was dodging the massive sword like it was nothing. Haku, who was nearby, was in a similar situation. The Uchiha was far more agile than she had expected given his stature. He was using a fire jutsu that was hot enough to melt her ice, which added to the confusion. Haku jumped away from her opponent, raising her hands to weave a seal, only to pull them apart to block a kick. Sasuke had no intention of being caught in the crystal ice mirrors again, and he was determined to keep her from doing so. He knew several ways out now, but that didn't mean he wanted to go through it again. He smirked as he finally found an opening, despite resisting the urge to use his Sharingan. He darted forward, breaking through her defenses and pinning her to the ground with a kunai at her throat. Their conflict was over. Shaking his head, he anticipated Haku's question and felt a little sad that the girl had lived such a life. That would no longer be the case if Naruto and he had their way. She could be Haku, a person with feelings and a goal, rather than a weapon. Zabuza was enraged. He couldn't get a hit on the boy no matter what he tried. How did he move so quickly? The blonde came to a halt and looked him in the eyes. Haku was defeated. Haku was stronger than you, right? Well, just to let you know, I am stronger than Sasuke. You have no chance of winning this fight, Zabuza. Surrender, he said calmly. Despite the fact that it was a genin, Zabuza detected an air of authority in it. Not happening, brat. Then I have no choice but to demand that you lay down your sword, Zabuza Momochi, wielder of the Kabikirabocho, and obey the oath that you took to Uzu when you received your sword, Naruto barked. The tone of a leader and experienced shinobi had replaced the younger, more naive tone. He took a step forward, ready to swing his sword at the boy, when he felt resistance. Kabikirabocho would not fight. Zabuza locked his gaze on the boy in front of him. Who exactly are you? Naruto Uzumaki, heir of the Uzumaki clan and heir to Uzu no Kuni, you owe my clan and me your allegiance as a member of the Seven. I ask you now, Zabuza, will you betray the oath you made to Uzu and turn your back on the clan that crafted your blade, or will you lay down your weapon and obey the alliance with Uzu? He stood firm. Zabuza closed his eyes and thought about what to do. He had sworn an oath a long time ago to defend the Uzumaki clan and help Uzu if they ever needed it. He couldn't point his blade at an Uzumaki unless it was a sanctioned sparring match, according to the oath. Furthermore, his responsibilities to Uzu were supposed to take precedence over his responsibilities to Kiri. If he obeyed, he would automatically lose the fight and be subject to whatever command the child gave him. If he refused to obey, he would lose his ability to wield the Kabikirabocho and would be considered a traitor to Uzu. Once discovered, traitors to Uzu had very short lives. He could feel Haku's fearful gaze on him. Kurenai gaped openly. To think that the boy was born with that much power over the strongest swordsman in Kirigakure. It's no surprise he asked to fight the swordsman. He knew that even if he couldn't physically compete with him, he could force his hand. She had the impression that no genin should have that much power over anyone. Very well, I yield, Zabuza finally said, kneeling. Naruto smiled at Kakashi and Sasuke as he relaxed. Their risk had paid off. In the coming war, they would have 2 more allies. The bridge was finished in less than a week. The entire village had gathered for a festival to commemorate their independence and newfound freedom. Naruto and Sasuke stood back and watched the festivities, unsure of what to do next. Especially since Shino lacks a team. Without proper training, he would undoubtedly be unprepared. At the same time, without one, he would have more time to devote to clan training. Naruto sighed and leaned back, looking over at his friend, who was staring at the lights in the village. I can only think of one possibility, and it may cause us more problems than we need, but it would help us expand our list of allies, Naruto finally stated. Sasuke nodded in agreement without saying anything. He understood what the Rokudame was thinking, and he agreed that it might cause more problems than they needed, but they also needed Shino to be prepared for the coming war. You know, Haku isn't in the village, Naruto finally said, making the Uchiha flush and nearly fall off the roof. He turned his head to look at his friend, who was laughing. Who said I was on the lookout for Haku? No one, he teased. The thing is, I know you too well. You think she's pretty? Sasuke growled at the blonde with a sly grin. So, have you decided what you're going to say to Hiashi yet? Sasuke asked, sending the blonde pale and sliding off the roof. Snickering, Sasuke reclined on the roof. That was something he expected. Hiashi had nearly castrated him the first time because Naruto had gotten tongue-tied and made it sound as if he was asking for something completely different. "T-E-M-E!" exclaimed the blonde. He groaned as he climbed back up onto the roof and lay next to his friend. He was afraid that it would be even worse this time because he remembered the previous attempt. There was some silence between the two before Sasuke spoke up. Do you think they'll take your proposal seriously? Yes, he answered confidently. Sasuke remained silent as they gazed at the stars for the first time in a long time. The next morning, as the Konoha nin said their goodbyes on the bridge, Naruto didn't seem concerned about Zabuza's absence. They turned after saying their final farewell and became the first people to cross the newly built, but unnamed, bridge. Following their departure from the village, the group returned to Konoha in silence. Kurenai was quiet because she knew Kakashi wouldn't be biting his tongue for much longer. She also knew that the Sandaime would investigate the mission and her training once she returned as a result of Sakura and Kiba's injuries. Not to mention the backlash she'd most likely face from the Inuzuka clan. The two Kiri nins dropped from the trees in front of them, jolting her out of her thoughts. Did you think about it? Naruto inquired of the senior shinobi. Yeah, after discussing it with Haku, we decided to return to Konoha with you as Uzu shinobi, Zabuza said, making the blonde's grin widen. Naruto reached into his bag and pulled two new Uzu headbands from a storage scroll, tossing them at the two. He had salvaged many items from the destroyed village. Sasuke smirked at the two, shaking his head at the blonde's uncanny ability to predict things. Welcome to the circus. No one knows who the ringmaster is. Groaning Zabuza and Haku tied their headbands on, and the now larger group continued towards the hidden leaf. The trip was quick and silent, and they were at the gate before they knew it. Naruto waved at Izumo and Kotetsu, laughing at their puzzled expressions towards Zabuza and Haku. They went to the Hokage's office after checking in. Naruto snickered at Sandaime's expression after they were shown in and the door closed behind them. What the hell happened? He exclaimed, staring at the two nin in front of him. We went on a C rank and then in A rank, Kurenai messed up, we cleaned up, and Naruto appears to be considering reviving Uzu, Kakashi summarized the entire month. As the Sandaime whined, Zabuza turned to look at the team, stunned. In less than a month, Team 7 had completed 2 C rank missions, 2 A rank missions, and, given who Gato had apparently hired to kill him and Haku, an S rank mission. Hiruzen sighed and glared at Kakashi, who simply laughed. The bandit elimination went off without a hitch. It was quick, and the genin performed admirably for their first assignment. Zabuza nearly choked on air. Following that, our rank mission to Uzu was also a success in terms of getting there. Unfortunately, there wasn't much that we could salvage from the ruins outside of a few Uzu headbands and clan census records. Everything else was destroyed. Upon our return to Konoha, we received your directives to head to Nami and assist Team 8 with a mission that got out of hand. Upon arrival, we discovered Haruno Sakura and Inuzuka Kiba. After forcing Zabuza to retreat, we sent the injured back to Konoha, where I assumed they received proper treatment at the hospital, after which I made the decision to continue with the mission and we escorted Tizuna back to his home. Over the course of about 2 weeks, I continuously trained the genin and we made a successful raid on Gato Mansion, but we were met with quite some resistance in the form of Maro the Mantis, Guro the Unyielding. Naruto laughed as he stepped forward. Here is the remainder of the fee for an A-rank mission and the fines for the misleading mission request that brought Nami back into good standing with the Hidden Leaf. This is a trade alliance request between Nami and Konoha and this is from Tizuna himself. I don't know what is in it but he asked me to give it to you. Hiruzen looked at the genin with wide eyes. Ryusuke the Dragon Tamer? Hiyari the Mistress of Torture? How the hell are you still alive? He exclaimed, making the shinobi in front of him flinch. Seven and Shino shrugged after a second. Team 7 and Shino shrugged as if to say, damned if we know. Hiruzen reclined in his seat and massaged his temples. Oh, by the way, where do we turn in bounties? Naruto asked, a knowing smirk on his face. They had salvaged their opponents' bodies and decided to turn them in for the bounty. That was in addition to the weapons and summoning contracts they had obtained. Kakashi can show you later, he grumbled exasperatedly. Naruto looked at Sandame after nodding. I need permission to leave the Hidden Leaf for a period of no less than 2 weeks to travel for clan-related business. Furthermore, as I have decided to place Zabuza and Haku on loan to the village as per the Uzu-Konoha Treaty, and I have decided to ask Zabuza to take over Shino's training as Kurenai is obviously not capable, I believe that the arrangement of Haku and Shino on the same team will be more than enough to keep his training going until. Where are you going? All you need to know is to check on the well-being of a clan member in another country, and I will also need a letter delivered to the Kusakage regarding a second member of the Uzumaki clan. The Sandame looked the boy in the eyes, unsure whether to allow it. He was becoming increasingly concerned about his sudden increase in strength and changing behavior, but there was nothing he could do. He took a deep breath and prepared to respond. As Naruto waited for the Sandame's decision, he began to consider his next course of action if the Sandame refused. He was well aware that the man was attempting to exert control over him, and he would not allow it. His actions and hidden motives for allowing the trip to Uzu had revealed everything he needed to know. The blonde couldn't figure out how the Sandame had gotten away with pretending to be someone he could trust for so long. Surely you understand, Naruto, that the rules state that you must receive at least 3 days off to recover from your mission, injured or not, right? Surely you realize that rule only applies to village missions, not clan missions? Naruto attacked the Sandame, causing him to flinch. He had outwitted him without even trying. What is so critical that it cannot wait for you to rest? As I previously stated, the well-being of a clan member. Kakashi simply nodded in confirmation to the unspoken question on Zabuza, Haku, and Kurenai's minds as the two locked eyes and began an intense staring match. Yes, this had become the norm for the two of them. I can go with or without your permission. I simply decided to try to do this without having to use my clan's name. Many people nowadays believe that their clan is more important than who they are. Naruto yelled at the senior ninja. Everyone in the room was silent as they watched the two engage in a verbal brawl. Regardless, you are still a genin, and as such, you are not permitted to leave the village on your own. I cannot send Kakashi on a village mission to accompany you, and I refuse to take the Jonin from any other team so that you can go for 2 weeks. Hiruzen retaliated. You don't have to. As a genin, I am not permitted to leave the village on my own. However, as a foreign diplomat of Uzu, as long as there are shinobi from Uzu to accompany me, you cannot prevent me from leaving nor retaliate for my leaving. There are 2 Uzu shinobi behind me, in case you didn't notice. Naruto responded once more. For once, the Sandame didn't respond right away because the laws had been turned against him and he was left staring at the blonde in front of him. How had he mastered the laws governing the distinction between clan, village, and foreign affairs? How could he have missed this? Very good. But I want you back in. The blonde cut him off again, and the Sandame never finished. You can't put a time limit on a clan matter, and you can't limit how much time I have to spend on a mission that doesn't involve Konoha. Sandame gritted his teeth and scribbled a quick note before handing it to Naruto, who looked it over, nodded, and then made a copy. He gave the copy to Sasuke as soon as it was finished for safekeeping. When it was out of sight, Sasuke simply nodded and slipped it into his hip pouch, sealing it in a storage seal. Let's go, Zabuza and Haku. Naruto turned and exited the room. They followed the Uzu prince, nodding. You are free to go, Hinata, Sasuke, and Shino. Please wait outside while I speak with Kakashi about a few things. Sandame gave the order, and the aforementioned ninja bowed and exited the room. Well? What did you discover? Did you find anything? As soon as the door was shut, the Sandame said. Just that the port villages that used to work with Uzu have no love for Konoha or its shinobi and believe that the village was responsible for Uzu's destruction. When it comes to traps, Naruto is very clever and highly observant, and the invading forces left almost nothing to salvage. As I previously stated, the majority of what we accomplished was clan census records and a family tree. There was nothing left except the headbands Naruto had scavenged from a storehouse. The entire place is a shambles, and I believe it was picked clean at one point. Kakashi lied with ease. Since learning about Konoha's role in Uzu's destruction, he had been trying to concoct a plausible lie that would work with the Sandame. I see. Has Naruto revealed anything about himself? Just that he believes you and the village are suffocating him unnecessarily and that he wants it to stop. He also believes that by tracking down any survivors who may have escaped, it may be possible to resurrect Uzu. However, to the best of my knowledge, has no plans to do so. He's been hiding his true strength the entire time because the village hasn't given him reason to believe he won't be sabotaged any further than he already has. Kakashi lied yet again. Hiruzen sighed and leaned back. He was terrified of it. Perhaps the boy had not been as devoted as he had once believed. Was his ecstasy and hyperactivity over what he thought was a familial relationship an act as well? How about Sasuke? He has also been concealing his strength in order to keep the village from worshipping him even more than they already do and treating him like Itachi. Hiruzen nodded and motioned for Kakashi to leave and for Kurenai to come in. The copy ninja sighed in relief at being able to get away with the lie. He would rather not be Kurenai right now. Naruto, for example. The only thing on Zabuza's, Naruto's, and Haku's minds as they raced through the forest towards their destination was how the Sandame had fought so hard to keep Naruto from leaving on clan business. Zabuza knew from previous experience with other clan shinobi that the Sandame's behavior was abnormal. Even Yugura, after he started acting strangely, would have strongly objected to that. Looking ahead, he noticed Naruto's teeth clenched and his hands balled into fists. He had the impression that there was more going on than he had previously thought. Do you know why the Rakudu Sennin was so revered, Zabuza? Naruto abruptly exclaimed. All I know is that he was apparently the first person to use chakra, and after defeating the 10-tailed beast, he created the moon. He returned my call. That's why, but it's never mentioned that he couldn't have done it alone. His brother assisted him. They didn't just keep the Jubi hidden away. They imprisoned their mother, the rabbit goddess. The moon is one of the seal's layers. Naruto responded, causing both shinobi to come to a halt. What? Haku and Zabuza both groaned. That's correct. Naruto turned around to face his companions. Only the Jubi's body and the rabbit goddess herself are truly sealed in the moon. The chakra of the Jubi was divided into 9 pieces. That means the Biju are just fragments of the 10 tails themselves. Not merely a fragment. They are unique individuals. They each have their own distinct personalities and quirks. Their personality includes both likes and dislikes. Doesn't that make them human by definition? If you put it that way, Naruto-san, they are human. Haku responded quietly. What prompted you to bring it up now? I just wanted you to know that I will not tolerate any disrespect for the Biju in my presence. Naruto stated quietly. He'd had more than enough of the Biju being referred to as beasts for his liking. He turned and continued his journey forward, thinking about how he could accomplish his goal without causing a war. Hinata entered the Hyuga manor quietly, making her way down to her father's study, knowing he was probably worried about her. She knocked on the door and waited for the stern man to let her in. She entered the room after hearing a very quiet "come in," and flinched slightly at seeing the council there as well. If this is a bad time, father, I can return. Hinata stated that she was aware that the council would most likely complicate matters. No, it's all right. Hisashi, her grandfather, said as he looked over at the inept female. He had never approved of her gentle demeanor and soft-spoken demeanor, but no matter what he tried, he could not persuade his son that allowing her to take over the clan would only lead to disaster. Furthermore, he was unable to persuade his son to remarry and bear a male heir. Hisashi narrowed his eyes at the older Hyuga before turning to look at Hinata. How did your missions turn out? He asked, surprising the elder council. It went swimmingly. Both missions were completed in a record amount of time. On our way home, we were told to go and assist Team 8, which was having some difficulties. Kiba and Sakura, sadly, were rushed back to the village in critical condition. Akamaru was also severely injured. Despite the appearance of Zabuza Momochi, Maro the Mantis, Guro the Unyielding, Ryusuke the Dragon Tamer, and Hiyari the Mistress of Torture, we were able to complete the mission. The bridge between Nami no Kuni and Hai no Kuni has been successfully completed, and I am now on a 3-day mission break. I believe Kakashi-sensei stated that between the time we left and returned, we had completed 2 C-rank missions, 2 A-rank missions, and an S-rank mission. Everyone's jaws dropped as she informed the clan's leader. None of the ninja she had mentioned were easily defeated on their own. Yet Hinata, the gentlest person they knew, stood before them, having survived meeting all 5 of them. I believe the Jonin did the majority of the work. Hisashi declared arrogantly. Kurenai-san was ordered to stay with the client during the raid on Gado's base, so she wasn't even present. Kakashi-sensei did defeat Guro the Unyielding, but it was Sasuke who defeated Maro the Mantis. Naruto-kun also defeated Ryusuke the Dragon Tamer by himself. Hiyari the Mistress of Torture was defeated by Shino and me. Hinata made a squeak. She knew her grandfather was looking for any excuse to undermine her efforts, and she wasn't going to let him get away with it. Hisashi was in front of his daughter looking for missing limbs and or irreparable damage before the old fool could say anything else. What was Kakashi thinking by leaving you to fight them alone? We had no idea they were there. They avoided being discovered by the scouting teams sent to determine how many people were working with Gado. We only found out they were there after the fights had begun, and we had already split up to ensure that no one escaped and that all of the entrances were covered. Hinata spoke quickly, attempting to prevent her father from reviving plans to construct a tower to house her. However, he could have been far more cautious. Hisashi sat back, content that nothing was missing. Hinata, giggling, gave her father a genuine smile. She had been missing him. Shino and I'm back. Shino yelled as he entered his clan's compound. While he expected his parents to be concerned, he did not expect them to almost asphyxiate him. Are you okay? His mother almost screamed at the boy, who nodded silently. Shibi could see his wife's concern. When they learned that more than half of his son's team had returned and were in critical condition in the hospital, he became very concerned for his son's safety. He had rushed to the hospital to see if anyone could tell him where Shino was, only to be told that none of them had regained consciousness and had been transported to the hospital in a stasis scroll by one of Kakashi's ninkin. He had been concerned about his son's safety ever since. I'm all right. As they walked into the kitchen to get some tea, he said and proceeded to tell them everything. He'd missed being at home. A few days later, as the entrance to Takigakure loomed ahead of them, Naruto, Zabuza, and Haku took a deep breath and then entered Takigakure. When approached by one of the guards, Naruto calmly explained that they needed to see his cousin, Takikage. The guard, his eyes widening, ordered them to remain where they were while dispatching a friend to inform their cage of the visitors. It wasn't long before the nin reappeared and led them to Shibuki's Takikage office. My ninja informed me that you have declared yourself my cousin. This is correct. I am Naruto Uzumaki, Uzu's heir. The blonde addressed the man in front of him. Before Shibuki could respond, the blonde placed the family tree on the desk and silently watched him read through it. For my own safety, the name of my father has been blurred. I'm attempting to locate and confirm the health and safety of all remaining Uzumaki now that Ryusuke, the traitor to Uzu and the reason it fell, has died. I decided to come here to check on the well-being of both of my cousins because Taki was the closest treaty partner we had. In that case, Fu, where is your sister? He could feel the atmosphere shift as soon as the words left his mouth. Shibuki had transformed from a friendly individual to a cold monster. Fu is on a mission and will be gone for some time. He spoke abruptly. Really? Your refusal to let me see her isn't because she's the Nanabi's Jinchuriki, is it? Naruto responded just as curtly. The ninja in the room were waiting for the right moment to flee, knowing that they would not survive being caught in a fight between them. Even if that were true, how did you know she was a Jinchuriki? He inquired coldly. Doesn't it take one to know one? I know where all of the Jinchuriki are at the moment. I know Fu is in the village, and I know she is in the building. He responded with a steady gaze. What does it matter to you what I do with the abomination that killed our parents? Naruto's eyes widened slightly, and a fierce killing intent spread through the room as he struggled to keep his temper under control. Either you bring her here in one piece and in good health, or I find her myself. I will not repeat my orders to you as Uzu's heir. Have I been clear, Uzumaki Shibuki? He hissed angrily. In fear, the cage backed away from the blonde. The killing intent emanating from the blonde was suffocating, and it felt monstrous, even inhuman. Who or what are you? The irritated Uzumaki with the power to wipe this country off the map but the common sense not to. Are you bringing her here or not? Zabuza and Haku exchanged a brief glance and felt themselves gulp a little in fear. He wasn't just irritated. He was on a murderous rampage. Shibuki motioned to one of the guards, who bolted from the room as quickly as they could. Naruto's killing intent faded slightly, and he began to tap his foot impatiently. After a few moments, the nin returned with a petite girl who appeared to have had too much sun recently. Her mint green hair and orange eyes were an unusual combination. Hello, Fu. I'm Naruto, your cousin. The blonde chirped, her eyes widening slightly in surprise. How is Chomei doing? How did you find out what Chomei's name was? She informed me. Do you want to come home and live with me now? I'm attempting to rebuild our clan, which includes you as a member. Certainly not. Can I truly? Responded at the same time. Shibuki, I wasn't asking you to shut up. This is a clan gathering, and you are not invited. I am an Uzumaki clan member. He yelled angrily. Are you? My mistake was thinking you were worthless as a human being and were impersonating an Uzumaki. I'll correct that right away. Naruto responded by removing the family tree from the desk and making some marks on it. The error has been corrected there. So, Fu, as a member of the Uzumaki clan, would you like to accompany me home? Haku was trying hard not to burst out laughing at Shibuki's expression. I'd like to, but Shibuki won't let me. Shibuki is powerless to stop it. As a member of the Uzumaki clan, I have final say over my clan members, and since you are one, I can bring you home without his permission because I believe you are in danger here. Naruto shook his head. If he doesn't like it, I'm sure I can contact your maternal aunt and inform her of what's going on. I'm sure the daimyo would like to know about your treatment at the hands of your ex-brother. Shibuki remained silent as his face turned an unusual shade of red. After a second, she nodded and turned to leave the room, smirking at the fuming cage. He snapped after a few steps, as if he had just remembered something he had forgotten. I almost forgot about it. Haku, the tags I gave you on the way here can now be used. Outside of Zabuza, Naruto, and Fu, Haku's eyes widened in realization as she vanished from view and quickly placed a tag on each of the people in the room's back. Nodding, they exited the room, and just as Shibuki was about to yell for a nearby shinobi to stop them, Naruto sent a wave of chakra into the tags, activating the seals on them. With nothing else standing in their way, Naruto's group was out of the country before the affected shinobi realized what had happened. What exactly did you do to them? Fu inquired, intrigued. I wiped their memories of your existence clean. Nobody named Fu has ever lived in the village, as far as they know, and if I am correct about how you were treated, the rest of the village won't care enough to say anything. Naruto replied with a sly grin. She laughed as she followed her cousin through the forest on their way to Konoha. Fu didn't mind where they went as long as she was with family who loved her. Fu had undergone a startling transformation by the time the group returned to Konoha's gate. She was no longer pale and starving. She had developed a healthy appearance and was quite tanned. She was also dressed in a very flattering white battle kimono that Naruto had purchased for her. They had spent the extra time training her massive strength in order to control it because her old village had clearly not taken the time to do so. They passed Izumo and Kotetsu on their way to Training Ground 7, knowing that Kakashi would be there. Most likely, he will be training Sasuke and Hinata, as well as taking over some of Shino's training. They were present, as he had predicted. Hello, Sensei. Naruto called out, causing the four ninja to turn to face the group. Dobi. Sasuke was relieved that his friend was safe. He was concerned that the Akatsuki had attacked him while he had been away. Shino, I'd like you to meet your third teammate, my cousin Fu, who carries the Nanabi within her. Naruto said cheerfully, causing the girl to stumble. How could he say something like that to someone so casually? Isn't he aware of how this could affect their working relationship? It's an honor to meet the queen. Shino spoke softly. A small tinge of red could be seen under his collar if one looked closely. Queen? Shino is an Aburame, and his clan's bodies serve as a home for Kikai insects. As a result, in their eyes, the Nanabi is their queen, and you are to be protected as a result. Furthermore, all of my close friends are aware of the Kyuubi, so it will not affect their relationship with you. Naruto explained, and the girl nodded in agreement. Maybe she did have a chance in Konoha after all. A chance to be happy and meet new people. Maybe even meet that special someone. Naruto happily nodded at his friends as the introductions concluded. He'd hoped they'd like Fu, and his faith had paid off. He smiled amusement as he looked around the training field, knowing that Shino had been put through the ringer with Kakashi's training program. He smiled again as he turned to face the other genin. How about we all go out for some ramen and get to know each other better before I explain some things that I know have been bothering you? Naruto suggested, drawing everyone's attention to himself. He dashed off, laughing at Sasuke's expression, without waiting for anyone to agree. We should follow the ramen addict. In this manner. Sasuke sighed as he led the newcomers through the village. He had expected the Rokudame to bring ramen to the occasion, but he hadn't expected him to take off the way he did. When he arrived at Ichiraku's, he looked at the bubbly blonde who was bouncing in his seat. You could have waited, and why do you always eat ramen? Sorry, I was a little excited, and it's not always ramen. I haven't had ramen since before we embarked on our first mission. He retorted angrily. Rolling his eyes, Sasuke quickly ordered some curry ramen and waited for the others to place their orders. He then turned to face his friend and Kage, waiting for him to begin. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's get down to business. Shino, I'm going to add Fu to your team. As previously stated, Zabuza will command your squad. This way, I know you'll be well trained and prepared for anything. We'll also need to contact Asuma's team leader, Kakashi-sensei. His team isn't even close to being ready for a single attacker, let alone an army. Naruto snorted before sipping his sweet tea. Kakashi nodded and raised an eyebrow at the genin. Guy's group as well. Hopefully, we'll be able to whip Neji into shape before he pisses off Dobi. He may actually lose his mind. Sasuke added, muttering to himself. Naruto only grunted in response, and their food arrived before they could say anything else. They put their conversation aside and started eating their lunch. Back to the practice field. Now that our stomachs are full, we need to schedule group training sessions for all of our teams. That way, we're all getting better, and Shikamaru gets some motivation. Naruto flopped to the ground. Fu had no idea what they were talking about or why Naruto seemed to be giving orders to his Jonin as if he was in charge of the team, but since no one was saying anything, she decided to remain silent. Zabuza and Haku were equally perplexed, but they knew that the boy wielded more than some clout in the village and was guarding a secret. I can talk to them about it, and hopefully they will agree. Actually, I think I'll talk about doing survival training with all of the teams. I'd have to clear that with the Sandame, but if it's approved, we'll be able to train in seclusion for a while and show off your skills without the Sandame spying on us. Kakashi responded solemnly. Naruto sighed and leaned back against the tree. I'll be able to tell who should be told and who should be kept in the dark after we've spent enough time alone. Zabuza, Haku, and Fu will be informed once we leave Konoha, but everyone else must be tested, as you were, sensei. Kakashi nodded in agreement and looked over at Zabuza. Have you ever worked with a genin squad? No. The swordsman trailed off, having a bad feeling. Let me show you what my team does for training on a regular basis. Hopefully, you'll get some inspiration for your team. Kakashi explained sweetly. Zabuza, Haku, Shino, and Fu leaned back, slightly concerned, to see how Team 7 trained. Shino had a good idea of what was coming, but the other three didn't. He found the idea of them witnessing it firsthand amusing. He smirked to himself, knowing that the show would be well worth the minor setback in training. After a few hours, when Kakashi finally called a halt to the training, he noticed that the swordsman's eyes were simply protruding from his head. He chuckled to himself and took a seat next to the startled Uzunin. Fu and Haku had similar expressions to him. Meanwhile, Shino was struggling not to laugh at the state of his comrades. When he first saw Team 7's training, he thought it was absurd, and now he had someone else to share that opinion with. "Are you okay, Zabuza?" Kakashi inquired as he opened a bottle of water and took a sip. "Do you do it every day?" In shock, he nearly screamed. "No. Thank goodness, I was beginning to thin. We do this while on a mission or after we have completed a mission. This is laid back." Kakashi continued, making the man gape even wider. "Are you crazy? Kiri's training program wasn't even that harsh before they changed it. There would have been no one left to take the exam if it had been." "That is not entirely correct. I've simply designed a training program to bring out the full potential of my genin based on what they were capable of when we met and how quickly they learn. The only thing standing in the way of a shinobi's success is themselves." Kakashi responded to the surprised shinobi. Haku and Fu were nearby, struggling to remember how to speak. What the hell happened? Unusually for Haku, he finally exclaimed. That was all it took for Shino to burst out laughing. Both girls groaned as they realized the boy had known what was going to happen but had not warned them. "You should have told us." Haku grumbled. Shino laughed and turned to face her. "Why? At the very least, someone else understands how I felt when I first saw that." He made it this far before bursting out laughing again. Haku leaned back, her eyes rolling. "What do you intend to train for? Is it the end of the world?" Fu inquired, somewhat sarcastically, not expecting an answer. "Precisely." The entire team responded unanimously in a tone that suggested they were dead serious. Zabuza blinked at the Jonin next to him before narrowing his eyes. "I believe we are entitled to an explanation of what is going on here so that I can determine how much training my team needs to complete in a short period of time." Naruto nodded again and sat down to explain. "The thing is, Zabuza, in Nami no Kuni, you and Haku were supposed to die on the bridge." He began to make the two of them gape. He took a deep breath and told them everything he'd told Kakashi and Shino. The three newcomers' expressions ranged from anger to shock, frustration, sadness, and determination. After a lengthy explanation, "That's all there is to it," Naruto said while sipping his water. As he looked at the three people in front of him, the silence was deafening. "So, Haku died while protecting me, and I died while attempting to take Gato with me?" Zabuza muttered, never once considering how their battle could have ended differently. Or that they'd come up against a Jinchuriki, and the strongest one at that. "Did I lose Chome?" Fu shivered as she felt fear creep through her. "Yes, but I'm not going to let it happen again. That is why I am making changes. However, we have encountered an unexpected situation. When we started diverging from the original timeline, we expected things to change, but they are changing faster than we expected. The Nami mission was never intended for Team 8. Naruto responded solemnly. "I see. You require us to be ready for anything as soon as possible." After a minute of digesting what he had heard, Zabuza said. "Especially with what's to come," Sasuke said while sipping his own water. "We will be invaded during the next Chunin exam, which will be held in Konoha. That is only a few months away, and this village is not at all prepared. That's excellent. Zabuza stood up and picked up the Kabikirabocho. Then I guess we'll stop wasting time. Let's go, Team 8, we have some training to do. Naruto leaned back and smiled as the team chased after their new Jonin. You are free to remove the privacy seals, Sasuke. Naruto smirked as Sasuke nodded as instructed. Team 10, you can come out now. You're good at gathering information, but not nearly good enough to outwit a censor. With a shocked expression, Kakashi raised an eyebrow as they emerged from the foliage. Trying to hone Asuma's stealth? They did a good job of hiding from my nose, but they never considered Hinata's Byakugan or the possibility of a censor on the team, and I doubt you mentioned it. How is your team still alive after that much training? Asuma insisted. Kakashi burst out laughing. They don't have much of a choice. Even if they die, they must complete their assigned exercises. In shock, Asuma stared openly at his friend. Kurenai, how are you? I doubt she handled her tongue lashing well. Asuma flinched as Kakashi asked. She was demoted back to Chunin and assigned to gate duty. When she got home, she slammed me for it, and after futile attempts to calm her down, I broke up with her because I don't need that in my life. Asuma stated that he was sitting. Please accept my apologies. I guess she's still stinging from the tongue lashing I gave her when we arrived to support her team. Asuma shrugged casually. She was already becoming overbearing. When we were together, she was so bossy, and God forbid I talked to someone who was single while I was with her. For a week, I wouldn't hear the end of it. Wasn't it just Zabuza Momochi? Shikamaru finally inquired. Yep. He now works for me. Standing, Naruto chirped. Well, we'll see you later. We must now complete our run. With a nod to their friend, Sasuke and Hinata dashed after the blonde, and once they were out of sight, Kakashi began snickering. What is the run, and what is so amusing? Asuma inquired. Of course, their 20-mile run. I guess I forgot to mention that I turned it into a survival obstacle course. He added after a few seconds, I also need to adjust the seals they're wearing. I haven't changed the weight, gravity, or resistance in a long time. Asuma gaped as Kakashi made a quick seal, followed by shouts from the forest. Naruto sounded almost as if he was cursing Kakashi's firstborn child. In that regard, Asuma, I was considering doing some group training sessions with you, Guy, and Zabuza. Are you curious? After 6 weeks. Now it appears that all of your teams have been growing at a steady rate. I don't see why I shouldn't let you go on a group survival training mission. Hiruzen stated after reviewing the results of Teams 7, 8, and 10. But are you certain you want to bring Team 9 with you? They are a year ahead of your teams. When we met, Zabuza had been on my and Kurenai's teams for nearly a decade. Kakashi brought this up. Guy felt himself twitch uncontrollably. When Kakashi challenged him instead of the other way around, he felt something was off. When he won, he insisted on having Team 9 join them on a survival mission. He should have just said no. Guy? Are you comfortable with this? Certainly, Hokage-sama. Guy yelled with all of his usual zeal. As he heard Naruto growl and saw Guy flinch, Kakashi shook his head. Naruto had been working on reducing the unnecessary shouting he and Lee tended to do since they ran into Guy's squad, and the last time Guy didn't tone it down, he woke up in the women's hot spring while several Anbu were relaxing. Very good. I see no reason why the request should not be approved. Hokage-sama, I'd also like to participate in missions while undergoing survival training. It would be beneficial for all of them to gain field experience. Furthermore, the village would continue to operate with no loss of manpower. Making the other Jonin groan, Kakashi added. When Zabuza and Asuma first started training together, Kakashi's obsession with working the genin almost to death had made them almost terrified. I see. Depending on where we are in the training, I can send Pakun back to the village to drop off mission reports and pick up new missions. Making the Sandame nod, Kakashi added. Despite his desire to keep Naruto and Sasuke in the village where they could be more easily monitored for any further erratic behavior, he knew that refusing in front of the other Jonin would raise questions that he was unwilling to answer. He leaned back after signing the necessary forms and handing them over to the copy Nin. Do you have any plans to return to the village? Hokage-sama, just in time for the Chunin exams. Kakashi responded. He sighed as he nodded and watched the 4 teams leave the room. He had a feeling that something was going to go horribly wrong soon, and he wasn't sure whether he should try to figure out what was going on or ignore it and hope it went away. Kakashi made a point of stopping by the mission hall on his way out to pick up a few missions for their trip to begin with. He actually found the Chunin's expressions amusing before mentioning that they would be divided into 4 teams, which is why he needed so many. He returned home and began packing their belongings for the trip. He wasn't going to let the future happen if he could avoid it. He refused to let Obito and Minato-sensei down. On the estate of Hyuga, Hinata dashed to her room, hoping to get everything ready as quickly as possible. Because of the nature of the mission, she knew she would require more than she normally carried. Specifically, medical supplies. As she packed more clothes, her mind wandered as she tried to figure out what Naruto-kun had wanted to discuss with her father. Naruto gulped as he knocked on the door of the Hyuga patriarch and awaited permission to enter. He entered the room after hearing the stern man call out and bowed to the man in front of him. He was more nervous this time than he had been the previous time. Hiyashi-sama, I'd like to request permission to date Hinata-han. He expressed his hope that it had come out steady and without any of his nervousness. Hiyashi felt a trickle of sweat run down his face as he stared him down. He had the impression that the room was getting smaller. Crap, I'm panicking again, he exclaimed. I see, and what are your plans for my daughter?
Okay guys, that's all for today. I hope you like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Till then, take care.